Chapter 712. In a rather messy apartment building in Brooklyn, two guys with bad intentions were tailing a beautiful girl with long platinum hair. They seemed to be waiting for the girl to leave so that they could take the opportunity to rape her and then rob her of her money. As one of the worst and most dangerous neighborhoods in New York, such vicious cases of robbery, murder, and rape happened almost every day. Under normal circumstances, the police would only make a simple registration and then check if there were any cameras around. If there were, they would look through the surveillance video to find the suspect, then issue a warrant, and then forget about it. They wouldn't waste time and energy on a poor guy who didn't pay much tax. Because of this, the more poor people gathered in the neighborhood, the more criminals there were, and the more vicious they were. They were not afraid of the law. In some places, even the elderly in their 70s and 80s, and children around 10 years old, without exception, relied on criminal activities to obtain the money needed to survive. In such a harsh environment, if a person wanted to survive, he must first learn two things. First, feed your conscience, sense of morality, guilt, and other unnecessary feelings to the dogs. Never meddle in other people's business, and never think that you can be a hero. Because in real society, more than 90% of heroes were equal to martyrs. Second, always be vigilant. Even if a neighbor looked very friendly during the day, after dark, they may become thieves and steal all the valuable things in your house. There was no doubt that Bernie Tesh, who lived in the first room near the door, was such a homebody who lived in the poor neighborhood for a long time. Although he was proficient in hacking, he had already observed the scene through the camera secretly installed in the corner of the corridor ceiling. But he didn't take any action, nor did he try to warn the goddess he had a crush on for more than 2 months. On the contrary, a strong expectation rose in his heart. He wanted to see what would happen next with his own eyes. Through the screen, he saw one of the men rushing forward with a switchblade. The woman, who had her eyes closed, suddenly raised her left foot without any warning. Using her 5-centimeter high heel, she viciously kicked the fatal spot between the man's legs. The next second, Fu asterisk K. The poor unlucky guy fell to the ground with a red face. He kept spewing out all kinds of filthy words to vent the pain from his lower body. Seeing that his companion had lost the ability to fight, the other man immediately took out his pistol and shouted nervously, "Hey, little bitch, if you don't want your head to explode, immediately raise your hands and slowly turn around and kneel down." "Oh, are you talking about me?" The woman tilted her head, revealing an exquisite face that made one's heart race. Obviously, she was none other than Silner, the female elf demon hunter who had disguised herself as a human with the help of the Orb of Deceit. Good heavens, it's so beautiful. Bernie, who was sitting in front of the computer, subconsciously swallowed his saliva. Although this wasn't the first time he had seen the other party's face, he still couldn't help but breathe heavily. He wanted nothing more than to pounce on the screen and lick it. Undoubtedly, it was the first time for the man with the gun to see the face of his prey. He was stunned for a full minute before he woke up from the shock. With his eyes shining, he whistled and praised, "Wow. Man, we're in luck today." "Idiot, shut up." The heavily injured man struggled to get up from the ground. Just when they were about to push Silner into the house and lock the door, a loud noise came from the end of the corridor. Bang! The dilapidated wooden staircase was directly torn from the middle by a powerful force. A large amount of sawdust and dust splashed in all directions, making it impossible to see what had happened. After a few seconds, a young man walked out slowly, waving his arms and complaining in a low voice, "Damn it, I hate old apartments. The space inside is too narrow, and it's impossible to complete a precise transmission." "Master." Upon hearing this familiar voice, Silner immediately pinched the two scumbags with lightning speed, stepped forward, and bowed deeply to the person in front of her. Although she was in the appearance of a human, one could still feel the innate elegance of a high elf. "How have you been recently?" Zhang Cheng glanced at the motionless body on the ground and asked with a smile. "Not bad, except for dealing with some guys who can't control themselves." Silner shrugged helplessly. "By the way, do you have something important to tell me?" In fact, This was not the first time she had encountered a similar situation. She would encounter it at least once or twice a day, and sometimes as many as 6 or 7 times a day. Beauty was a sin in this ugly society, especially when the one who possessed such beauty was a seemingly weak woman. That's right. I'm here to inform you that your pleasant vacation is over. Let's go. I'll take you to participate in an intense and exciting hunt. Zhang Cheng did not mean to hide anything and openly expressed his intention. The word hunt obviously awakened the demon hunter in Silner's heart. A beautiful arc appeared at the corner of her mouth. May I ask who the prey is? Sorry, I don't know who the prey is for the time being, but I can tell you that it's very likely to be a special life form called God. How is it? Isn't it exciting? While saying this, Zhang Cheng stretched out his right hand and gently stroked Silner's smooth chin. His eyes were shining with excitement. God? Interesting. My dual blades have never been stained with the blood of God. This is a rare opportunity. As soon as he finished his words, all of a sudden, deadly evil fire erupted from Silner's body, burning off all her clothes, revealing the armor and weapons hidden underneath. At the same time, her true form that was covered by the orb of deception was completely released. The perfect combination of beauty and evil. SH*T. Can you tell me what the F*CK is this? Bernie, who saw this through the monitor, couldn't help but tremble all over. He accidentally knocked over the coffee cup next to the mouse. Bang! The sound of the cup hitting the floor echoed in the corridor. Zhang Cheng, who was always vigilant, immediately locked onto the corresponding door when he heard this sound. He said meaningfully, there's a little mouse peeping at us. Get rid of it for me. Don't forget to come to my place before sunset tomorrow. Don't worry, I'll get rid of all the trouble. Silner sneered and rushed into the room near the door. Chapter 7:13. Just as Silner tore off her angelic disguise, the Black Dragon Princess, who was far away in a top apartment in Manhattan, was lying on a soft bed with her eyes closed, enjoying the comprehensive three-dimensional service of 2 female masseuses from head to toe. Obviously, compared to the decadent, aristocratic life in Storm City, she undoubtedly preferred the feeling of controlling everything through money and power. This was especially true for those seemingly worthless pieces of green paper. Countless people actually went crazy over them, wishing that they could exchange everything they had for them. In just a few months, Onyxia had basically understood the operating mechanism of the United States of America and the many privileges that a rich person could enjoy. In her eyes, this country full of struggles, cooperation, and money and power transactions was simply tailor-made for her. If the aristocrats in Storm City were all like the politicians in the United States, she would have become a veritable queen instead of being exposed and expelled by force. However, the Black Dragon Princess did not forget Zhang Cheng's warning. She did not dare to be too presumptuous. She only killed her nominal husband, followed by a little spell to shut up those who had the right of inheritance. She took nearly 80% of the inheritance and used the remaining 20% to symbolically send away several other relatives who had the right of inheritance. At present, she was already a well-known widow in New York's upper-class society. She was eligible to enter the clubs that provided social platforms for the rich and powerful. She could talk face-to-face with important people such as mayors, senators, police chiefs, bankers, billionaires, and even make some unknown deals. After all, any man with a normal biological orientation would reject a mature woman who was sexy and charming, not to mention that she also had a considerable amount of property. Just as Onyxia was thinking about how to obtain more wealth and power without alarming too many people, she suddenly felt a strong energy fluctuation. Before she could react to what had happened, Zhang Cheng passed through the portal and appeared on the balcony of the apartment out of thin air. Fortunately, the 2 masseuses had their heads down and did not notice the scene outside the window. Otherwise, they would have screamed at the top of their lungs. Okay, you all get out. I want to be alone for a while. The Black Dragon Princess quickly sat up, covered the front of her body with a bath towel, took out a few bills from her wallet, and handed them to the masseuse. Thank you for your generosity, my lady. I wish you a pleasant evening. When they realized that they had received double the service fee and tips, delight immediately appeared on their faces. They bowed with smiles on their faces, turned around, pushed open the door, and disappeared at the end of the corridor. Seeing that the unrelated personnel had left, Zhang Cheng pushed open the floor-to-ceiling window and walked into the room. While admiring Onyxia's perfect human figure, he teased with a faint smile, "Massage oil? You know how to enjoy yourself more than I thought. How does it feel to be rich?" "Not bad. I like it here." He liked the intensity of the humans here even more. Do you know? In Azeroth, whether it was humans, elves, dwarves, gnomes, undead, orcs, taurens, or trolls, there was an indescribable obsession in their bones. It was this persistence that made it difficult for them to be bought over by money or power. But your world is different. There are very few people here who are not moved by money and power. After that, the Black Dragon Princess picked up a glass of expensive top-grade brandy and drank it in one gulp, licking her seductive red lips. "You haven't given up on those boring ambitions?" Zhang Cheng asked in a surprised tone. Onyxia rolled her eyes flirtatiously and asked straightforwardly, "Why should I give up? I'm a natural queen, and I like the taste of controlling power. And didn't you say that as long as I don't use magic, I can do whatever I want? Are you regretting it now?" "No, I didn't mean that." Zhang Cheng shook his head gently. "What I mean is that power is essentially a social need expressed by social relations. It is something that extends from social needs. To put it simply, it is the desire to integrate into society and gain social recognition. I don't understand. Why would a powerful species like you, who was born far superior to humans, desire to integrate into humans and gain their recognition? If it was to rule a group of dragons, I wouldn't be surprised at all, because you're on the same level of life." "You mean I subconsciously want to be a member of the human race?" The Black Dragon Princess frowned subconsciously. Obviously, she didn't agree with this theory at all. "Isn't it? Think about what you've done. Although in Azeroth, your purpose was to weaken the Stormwind Kingdom from the inside, you were also constantly taking power and trying to replace it. In fact, what you want in your heart is not destruction, but recognition. Only when a person truly understands his own desire can he become the master and not be controlled." Zhang Cheng analyzed meaningfully. "Damn it, what are you talking about? Why can't I understand a word?" Onyxia was obviously touched by a sensitive nerve, and her mood suddenly became irritable. But Zhang Cheng acted as if he didn't see anything and continued to say, "It doesn't matter if you don't understand. I suggest you read Maslow and his theory of the 5 basic needs. You know that knowledge is power. If you ignore knowledge, it won't be long before you suffer a big loss. In addition, I'm here to inform you that there will be an intense and exciting hunt in 3 days. It is likely that you will be summoned at that time. You'd better be mentally prepared." "Hunt?" The Black Dragon Princess keenly grasped the key words. "Yes, I'm going to explore the legendary city of gold of the Incas. It is said that there may be a god living in it." Zhang Cheng gave the answer without hesitation. "God? Oof." Onyxia laughed contemptuously. As the daughter of Deathwing, she undoubtedly knew very well that most of the so-called gods were just relatively powerful individual life forms. They were far from omnipotent as mortals thought. In short, it's never wrong to be careful. Well, continue to enjoy your life. I won't disturb your mood." As the last word blurted out, Zhang Cheng once again activated the teleportation magic and disappeared without a trace. Looking at the empty carpet, the Black Dragon Princess threw the bath towel directly on the sofa next to her. She was naked from head to toe, opened a laptop, and entered keywords such as Maslow and the 5 basic needs into the search engine. Instantly, a large number of related content was densely listed. At first, she still had a disdainful attitude, but it didn't take long for her to be deeply attracted. She had never thought that there would be such a complicated motive behind the seemingly simple psychological activity. Combined with her own actions, she immediately had an indescribable understanding. Chapter 714. 3 days was neither short nor long. But for Zhang Cheng, who was actively preparing for war, it was almost over in a flash. On the morning of the fourth day, he brought along the fully armed demon hunter Silner and boarded a small yacht docked in New York Harbor. Laffern, who had been waiting for a long time, directly opened the ultra-long distance teleportation magic array and instantly teleported everyone from North America to one of the most famous countries in South America, Colombia. Of course, this famous was not a compliment, but a disguised sarcasm. Since the 1980s, this country had been the world's largest source of drug exports. It had even given birth to the legendary drug lord Pablo Escobar, as well as the Medellin drug cartel under him, with limitless glory. Although with the advent of the 21st century, chemical drugs were replacing traditional drugs in cheaper and more exciting ways, the Colombian drug lords were still a force that could not be ignored in the drug market. But these had little to do with this trip. They did not come to South America, which was known as magical realism, for the interests and troubles of the ordinary people's world. Instead, they came to the deepest part of Lake Guadalvide and opened the entrance to the City of Gold. Many Europeans who were obsessed with gold naively thought that when the Spanish army attacked, the Incas threw a large number of gold products into the bottom of the lake, so they had always wanted to drain the lake in order to get the wealth that was enough to make a country crazy. However, the truth was that the last successor of the Inca Empire had the priests forcefully open the entrance to the City of Gold through a bloody sacrifice. They sent all the wealth and the souls of the dead Incas into the City of Gold, leaving nothing for the Spanish invaders. But unfortunately, very few people knew the truth, and almost all of them were residents of the underground world. Otherwise, there would not have been so many farces about the failed treasure hunt. About 30 minutes after setting off from the town of Guadalvide by car, the group of people arrived at the beautiful shore of Lake Guadalvide. It had to be said that the lake was indeed very beautiful. It was like an emerald inlaid on the ground, giving people endless fanciful thoughts. But before Zhang Cheng had time to appreciate the surrounding scenery, a super heavy truck dragged a heavy container and came to a stop less than 30 meters away from the lake. The person who jumped out of the car was none other than Faust, who had rushed over from Europe. He glanced at Silner, whose eyes were covered with a black cloth, and greeted her. "Sorry, my goods were stuck at the customs for more than half an hour, so I'm a little late." "No, we've just arrived. Also, I'm a little curious. Who on earth dares to block your goods?" Laffern pursed his lips, revealing an expression of interest. "A greedy and stupid fat pig. Do you know? This guy actually asked me for a bribe in public and threatened that if I didn't take out $50,000, he wouldn't let the container cross the border." As he spoke, Faust's eyes flashed with a bone-piercing cold light, causing the surrounding temperature to drop by several degrees. An ordinary person? I started to admire his courage. How is it? Is this guy still alive? Laffern couldn't help but laugh, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Faust's reaction was the opposite. He replied with a gloomy face, "Don't worry, he's still alive because I don't want to attract the attention of the South American Supreme Council for the time being. But when this operation is over, I promise to kill him and all his family and friends." Even so, I still admire him a little. After all, he did what even the Angel Legion couldn't do back then. Laffern held back his laughter and continued to tease him. The two had known each other for so many years, but it was the first time he saw the other party being humiliated. Just thinking about it made him feel amused. Enough is enough. Don't forget, there are more important things waiting for us to do. Now is not the time to joke. Faust rolled his eyes in annoyance. He controlled the living dead driving the truck and stepped on the gas pedal to rush into Guadalvide Lake. Zhang Cheng saw this scene and immediately showed a look of surprise. He asked in an uncertain tone, "That container isn't filled with undead creatures, is it?" Hee. You guessed right. Do you know what my biggest gain was when I attacked the Vatican back then? It wasn't the powerful magic items stored in the secret chamber of the Vatican, nor was it the countless gold and silver jewelry. It was a total of 600 angel corpses that were complete, including their souls. And I used a special method to transform all these corpses into angels of death. As the last word was blurted out, Faust's face showed a cruel and proud smile. "I see." Zhang Cheng nodded thoughtfully. He finally understood why the forces of heaven were like crazy back then. They did not hesitate to send a large number of angels of judgment into the human world to search for the whereabouts of the murderer at the risk of starting a war with the Congress and the forces of hell on two fronts. It was important to know that heaven was not a demon whose reproductive ability was comparable to that of a cockroach. The birth of each angel required a long process. Although their combat power was abnormally strong, their numbers were much smaller. They could tolerate the death of angels, but they could never tolerate the souls of angels being taken away and transformed into other life forms. Well, let's stop chatting. Let's quickly go to the bottom of the lake and see what secrets are hidden in the City of Gold. After all, in a while, there might be tourists coming. I don't like being stared at like a monkey in a zoo. After saying that, Lafren took out the golden mural and swaggered toward the center of the lake. The moment one of his feet stepped on the surface of the water, the lake suddenly made a splashing sound, and a straight passage was formed in the middle. From the deepest part of the lake that was covered by silt, it could be seen that this was originally a man-made stone staircase. There was no need for verbal communication. Zhang Cheng immediately followed, and in a short while, they arrived in front of a pyramid-shaped underwater building. Through the murals carved on the stone, it could be vaguely seen that this was a temple used to hold sacred sacrifices. Lafren carefully placed the golden mural on the highest altar, cut it open, and let the blood flow into the bowl made of gold. When the entire bowl was filled with blood, a dazzling light suddenly descended from the sky and shone directly on the surface of a huge obsidian pillar, reflecting strange patterns. Before the others could react, the obsidian pillar turned into liquid with a bang and slowly condensed into the shape of a door. Through the slightly turbid black liquid, they could clearly see the spectacular scene on the other side. A city completely built with gold pieces of different sizes, the legendary City of Gold. Chapter 7:15. Which one of you will go first? Lafren quickly stopped the bleeding and turned to ask his two allies. Although this small injury was nothing to him, in order to prevent anyone from destroying the teleportation gate, he decided that it was better to stay here for the time being. Faust glanced at Zhang Cheng, who was standing there silently. No one knew what he was thinking, and said in a relaxed tone, "I'll go first. After all, there's nothing more suitable than my army of death angels to invade an unknown world." As soon as he finished speaking, the container truck that had sunk to the bottom of the lake suddenly opened slowly. Then, one after another, monsters with death energy all over their bodies crawled out from inside. They quickly passed through the flowing black liquid and entered another space. The reason why they were called monsters was that these so-called angels of death did not actually look like normal angels. Instead, they were pieced together by suturing different body parts to form a very ferocious and terrifying humanoid creature. Think about it, a beautiful female angel with two arms of different lengths and thicknesses, a man's upper body, and a centipede-like black stitches on her face. What kind of terrifying picture would that be? She probably didn't even need to put on makeup to act in a scary horror movie. But what was more frightening was that these corpses still contained the souls of angels who had fallen under the horrible torture. Therefore, they still retained their rich combat experience when they were alive, as well as the innate sensitivity of angels to magical energy. This also meant that every death angel was actually a mixture of a warrior and a spellcaster. When their numbers reached a certain level, they could even defeat enemies who were countless times stronger than themselves through cooperation. In addition, their minds were filled with hatred and madness. Anyone who fought with them would have to be prepared to be bitten. Although to a certain extent, they were still in the category of cannon fodder, at least they were cannon fodder of higher quality. After watching the last death angel pass through the black door, Faust took off the top hat on his head and bowed slightly. "I'll go first. You guys better hurry up and follow, or you might miss something interesting." After saying that, he walked into the portal without hesitation and ordered his subordinates to attack everything that had life in their surroundings. Wherever they passed, whether it was animals, plants, or the souls of the dead Incan people, they were all massacred. Even the ground was emitting an aura of decay and death under the corrosion of the death energy. I didn't think that after so many years, he would still be as unscrupulous as before. Lafren sighed softly. Unscrupulous? Zhang Cheng shook his head with a faint smile on his face. No, it's just that he hasn't seen an opponent stronger than him, so strong that he can't defeat him. That's why he's always had this inexplicable confidence in himself. Oh, why do you say that? Lafren stroked his chin with interest. This was because he knew that this young man had fought with Faust in the fragment world, and had even destroyed one of Faust's clones. However, apart from Faust himself, no one else knew the exact details. You've known each other for so many years, but you haven't noticed? Faust inadvertently revealed his laziness and arrogance. It's been too long since he's encountered an opponent who's really on par with him, or even stronger than him. Hence, he's unknowingly placed himself in a very high position. Of course, you're in a similar situation to a certain extent, just slightly better. After saying that, Zhang Cheng ignored Lafren's slightly displeased expression and brought Silner straight through the portal. Accompanied by a strong sense of oppression, the two of them appeared on a platform that was flashing with a dazzling golden light in the next second. As the city of gold was made up of gold blocks of different sizes, the light emitted by the small sun in the sky shone on the surface of the gold bricks and immediately formed a strong reflection effect. If it were an ordinary person, they would probably be blinded by the golden reflection. Fortunately, Zhang Cheng was not an ordinary person. Whether it was divinity or magic soul, he could easily eliminate this adverse effect. As for the demon huntress Silner, she was a standard blind person who couldn't feel the existence of light at all. As a standard spellcaster, Zhang Cheng did not rush to start a massacre like Faust in an attempt to lure the owner of this place out. Instead, he sensed the magical energy in the air immediately. As a result, he found that the positive energy here was far more abundant than anywhere else, and even accounted for an exaggerated proportion of more than 50%. It was clear that in this environment, positive energy and holy light spells could produce an effect that was nearly twice as effective as normal. As everyone knew, whether it was positive energy or holy light energy, they were essentially undead killers. In this environment, not only would the attack power of the Angel of Death be greatly weakened, but the death energy consumed when moving would also be much more than usual. It was precisely because of this point that Faust desperately expanded his death domain in an attempt to permanently change the surrounding environment through erosion in order to create a forward base for his undead army to repair and recover. But unfortunately, before he could settle the area with a radius of about 40 meters under his feet, a group of warriors in golden armor suddenly jumped out of the huge reservoir in the center of the City of Gold. Each of them held spears and axes made entirely of light beams and rushed toward him. What's this? Seeing this scene, Faust immediately stopped what he was doing and stared ahead with glowing eyes. As a necromancer, he could clearly feel that every warrior was made up of human souls and a powerful energy that was almost as dazzling as the sun. Kuhada! The warrior at the front shouted a slogan that no one knew the meaning of. He raised the spear in his hand that was emitting a dazzling golden light and threw it with all his strength. Boom! Accompanied by the loud sound of the spear surpassing the speed of sound, a golden light directly penetrated Faust's chest and successfully destroyed almost all of his important internal organs, including his chest and abdomen. Only the part above the collarbone was still floating in midair. Generally speaking, if one was so thin that they suffered such serious injuries, not to mention normal people, even trolls with powerful self-recovery abilities would be dead. But Faust was still alive. He exclaimed in a tone full of amazement, "Unbelievable! Is this the power of the gods? To be able to use the fragile souls of humans to create such powerful creations." As he spoke, for some reason, his severely injured body began to rapidly grow bones, internal organs, muscles, blood vessels, and skin. In less than 10 seconds, he was restored to his original state. Apart from his clothes that had already been turned into dust by that blow, everything else was intact. Calm. Wonderful book house. Calm. Chapter 716. The golden-armored warrior clearly didn't want to talk. He roared and charged forward, raising the weapon in his hand that was completely made of energy, wanting to cut the enemy in front of him into pieces. Unfortunately, as the world's most powerful necromancer, Faust wasn't so easily killed. Before the dangerous energy weapons could get close to him, the ribs that he had just recovered were like a blooming flower of death, spreading out 3 to 4 meters in all directions, instantly piercing through the hearts of 7 or 8 golden-armored warriors. What was more terrifying was that these sharp bones emitting black smoke weren't just purely physical attacks. They were also corroding the enemy's soul at an extremely fast speed. In just a few seconds, the golden-armored warrior's originally fragile human soul was completely corrupted, destroyed by the powerful positive energy that filled his body. Without a doubt, Faust used a very ingenious method, bypassing the opponent's strongest point and focusing on the opponent's weak point. That was why he was able to easily kill the enemy, who should have been very difficult to deal with. Looking at the bodies that were lying on the ground, unable to move due to the loss of their souls, he couldn't help but sneer and say sarcastically, "What a pity, the weakness is too obvious. Looks like God isn't omnipotent. At least I have reason to suspect that their brains aren't too bright." "Not too bright? You seem to have some kind of misunderstanding about God, don't you?" Zhang Cheng slowly came to the golden-armored warrior's side, saying with a faint smile, "I don't understand what you mean." Faust looked puzzled. Zhang Cheng raised his supreme authority and pierced through the heart of one of the bodies, allowing the abundant positive energy to slowly dissipate in the air. He explained meaningfully, "You don't understand the true horror of God at all. Do you know that the world of ordinary people has a point of view about the level of energy utilization of civilization and technology? In fact, it's also applicable to supernatural powers." "What point of view?" Faust frowned subconsciously. Like most of the powerhouses in the underground world, he wasn't very interested in the rapid technological changes in the outside world. It could even be said that he didn't care about it. The former Soviet astronomer Nikolai Kardashev once proposed a hypothetical level of alien civilization in the universe in 1964. Simply put, it was based on the amount of energy a civilization could use to communicate with other planets to determine what level they were at. For example, before the invention of firearms, humans had been using the energy from their muscles and a small amount of mechanical energy. They were so primitive that the efficiency of killing each other was very low. However, with the invention of gunpowder, humans suddenly mastered chemical energy, and the efficiency of killing each other increased by a large margin. The power of weapons also began to increase rapidly, and they could easily kill thousands of their own kind. Later, physicists discovered the legendary radioactive material. For the first time, the energy level was raised to the level of nuclear fission. Just a little bit was enough to turn half of the city into ashes. As for nuclear fusion, which was still being researched and developed, it had once again increased the energy usage by dozens or even hundreds of times. By the same logic, in the world of supernatural forces, there's also a huge difference in the level of energy. For example, magic users were generally more powerful than people who relied purely on physical strength to fight. Wizards who obtained magic power through in-depth study and research were generally more powerful than witches who relied on their innate bloodline. Most importantly, in the field of supernatural powers, the gods had much more powerful energy levels than the mortals. Look at the energy shells on the ground that are almost solid. Do you think you can do it? No, my dear friend, you can't. So please don't think that gods are nothing. Although they have all kinds of flaws, they can go further on the path of self-improvement and self-improvement. As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Cheng immediately turned his gaze to the huge reservoir in the central square of the City of Gold. He placed one hand on his chest and bowed slightly. "Do you think I'm right, respected ancestral goddess Bakhua?" Splash! There was a fierce splash of water. An Indian woman wearing a lot of gold jewelry from head to toe walked out. Although she did not look beautiful, she exuded an inviolable majesty. Moreover, with every step she took, the Incan souls on both sides prostrated themselves to show their respect. Goddess? Interesting. The corners of Faust's mouth curled up slightly, releasing an undisguised murderous intent. The angels of death hovering in the sky seemed to have sensed their master's intention, and they all swooped down to test the waters. However, before they could get close, they were overturned by waves that appeared out of thin air and were firmly pressed against the ground. These powerful, undead creatures that had been swaggering around a few minutes ago were now like newborn babies, unable to fight back in front of a true god. When she was about 10 meters away from the intruders, the goddess stopped and used a strange language that could be understood by the brain to berate them. Kneel, despicable thieves and robbers. I, as the master of the city of gold, sentence you to death for blasphemy. Sentence? Ha 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 ha. Faust heard this and immediately laughed wantonly. As he laughed, he mocked God. What does she think she is? And what does she think we are? Don't make such a fuss. You have to understand that the person standing in front of us is a woman who was born in a primitive tribe thousands of years ago. Her thinking is still stuck in the era when humans crazily worshipped gods and obeyed their orders. Zhang Cheng shrugged and joked. Impudent. Blasphemers will be punished. You will not only die a painful death, your souls will also be sent to the sun to burn for 10,000 years. Obviously, Bachwai was not the kind of goddess who liked to communicate with her enemies. With a single word of disagreement, she immediately summoned an endless amount of water, setting off huge waves that were hundreds of meters high. Faust undoubtedly did not care about a few huge waves. Without turning his head, he asked his ally, Are you going to do it, or should I? I'll do it. You should know that in the eyes of alchemists, all forms of damage are not much of a threat. With that, Zhang Cheng took a step forward, raised his right index finger, and lightly tapped the air. Instantly, the huge wave that originally contained terrifying kinetic energy suddenly began to freeze for some reason. In less than a second, it completely turned into an exquisite ice sculpture, completely losing its indomitable momentum. Bachwai saw this scene, and her pupils suddenly shrank. With a vigilant face, she questioned, You are not a mortal. Who are you? Me? In fact, I'm not too sure who I am now. But one thing is certain, and that is that I'm going to kill you next and uncover the secrets hidden in your body. Chapter 717. Kill me? How arrogant. Do you know where this place is? This is the city of gold, the place blessed by the great sun god Inti. Goddess Bachwai was clearly enraged. She roared and opened her arms to look at the sky. Instantly, the mini-sun that was emitting light and heat suddenly burst out with golden light that made it hard for people to open their eyes. And every ray of light was like a sharp arrow that fell from the sky, piercing the souls of the Incas kneeling on the ground and injecting an unimaginable amount of positive energy into them. In less than a minute, thousands of warriors wearing golden armor and holding energy weapons were created out of thin air. Most importantly, they didn't seem to need any orders or commands at all. They spontaneously gathered into a tight battle formation and lined up in the square as if they were soldiers in a battle formation. Seeing this sudden change, Zhang Cheng didn't show the slightest bit of panic. Instead, he showed a contemptuous smile. Do you think that the human wave tactic will work on me? Whether it works or not, we'll only know after we try. Also, do you think that these sun warriors are just consumables? No, they're much stronger than you think. As the last word left her mouth, Bachwai immediately raised her right hand and gave the order to attack. The sun warriors immediately roared in unison. Then, half of them charged while the other half gathered the energy weapons in their hands and formed a huge spear of light that was dozens of meters long. The next second, boom, the spear of light flew out at a speed that couldn't be seen by the naked eye and fiercely smashed into the enemy's position, causing a violent energy explosion. The power was so strong that even gold melted into boiling liquid under the terrifying heat. But unfortunately, as Zhang Cheng had repeatedly mentioned before, for Master Alchemist, too simple an attack form couldn't pose a real threat. He was still standing in the golden liquid, unscathed. He raised his left hand and aimed at the Sun Warriors who were charging on the way. He sneered and muttered to himself, "Want to drown me with a sea of enemies? Naive. Maybe the super missile storm can change your stupid idea." As soon as he finished speaking, thousands of beautiful magic missiles suddenly burst out from his fingertips, drawing beautiful arcs in the air and launching an indiscriminate attack on all the enemies in front of him. In less than 3 to 5 seconds, nearly 2/3 of the Sun Warriors directly disappeared from this world together with their souls, and the other 1/3 were all injured. Not to mention them, even 2 or 3 angels of death who were accidentally caught in the attack were turned into ashes under the terrifying barrage of bullets. With the enhancement of the Supreme God equipment, even the most ordinary spells could cause extremely terrifying damage, not to mention the magically enhanced version of the missile storm. Goddess Batchwai obviously didn't expect that the warriors that she created by borrowing the power of the Sun God could not even last one round. Her originally arrogant face was full of shock. Zhang Cheng, who had always only focused on the results and not the process, naturally wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity to launch a sneak attack. He took out a cone-shaped warhead from his magic waste bag and returned it to its normal size of more than 1 meter. He quickly entered the corresponding password, then turned around and pulled Faust and Silner, activating the group teleportation spell to escape tens of kilometers away. Before the other two could react to what had happened, they saw a ball of light that was countless times brighter than the sun suddenly lit up in the center of the city of gold in the distance, followed by a deafening explosion and earthquake. Boom! Accompanied by a mushroom cloud that soared into the sky, the powerful shock wave instantly razed everything within a range of more than 10 kilometers to the ground. The terrifying heat generated at the instant of the explosion directly formed a huge pit in the center of the city of gold. Nuclear warhead. Faust stared at the doomsday-like scene in the distance, dumbfounded. He couldn't believe that the young man standing beside him was crazy enough to detonate the most powerful weapon in the world of ordinary people without hesitation. That's right. To be exact, it's a 20 million ton hydrogen bomb warhead. How isn't it powerful? I only managed to get my hands on it 2 days ago with great difficulty. Don't underestimate the power of technology. I can guarantee that even the most powerful god will be severely injured in the face of nuclear weapons. Zhang Cheng replied meaningfully. What was the biggest difference between magic and technology? The answer was actually very simple. The former was a kind of power that required extremely high talent and a long period of research to obtain, and even if a certain knowledge accumulation and learning system was formed, there was no guarantee that it could be passed down 100%, let alone go further on the original foundation. But the latter was different. It was a kind of power that could be inherited and developed continuously. The most important thing was that once a system was formed, it could be mass-produced, and even people who didn't understand the principle could use it according to the operation instructions. In particular, nuclear warheads with power comparable to large-scale legendary magic, in essence, only needed a detonation button, so simple that even an idiot could activate it. As for the later launch procedures and multiple passwords, they were obstacles set up to prevent accidents, and were not indispensable parts. Zhang Cheng saw this point and decided to secretly collect nuclear warheads to give the enemy a big surprise at the critical moment. Even if he couldn't kill the enemy, he could buy enough time for himself. Ha ha ha, you're simply a madman. The craziest guy I've ever seen in my life. But I like the way you do things. After a short moment of absent-mindedness, Faust burst into a burst of laughter, and tears flowed uncontrollably. Because the outside world had always regarded the attack on the Vatican as the craziest action in history. But now he found that there was a young man who was even crazier than him, who completely ignored any rules and consequences. Crazy. Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders in disbelief. What we're doing now isn't crazy enough. Since we're already crazy, we might as well go even crazier. Well said. The world we live in is crazy. That's why only the craziest guy is qualified to reach the peak of power. Let's go. Let's see if the poor goddess is dead. If not, leave the rest to me. You have to understand that a god's corpse is very precious. I don't want it to be damaged to the extent that it can't be repaired. After saying that, Faust leaped, a pair of huge bone wings spread out from his back and flew in the direction of the City of Gold. Although the explosion just now had lost almost all of the Death Angels, he didn't feel the slightest bit of heartache, because the body of a god was far more valuable than hundreds of Death Angels. As the saying goes, although quantity was important, quality was more important than quantity, especially under the premise that quantitative changes had not led to qualitative changes. After watching the necromancer gradually disappear into the distance, Zhang Cheng turned to the female demon hunter beside him and said, "You can start moving now. Remember to be careful. I don't want you to be killed on your first mission." "Please don't worry, Master. I won't die so easily." Chapter 718. The central square of the City of Gold, at this moment, it had turned into a huge crater under the impact of the shocking energy produced by the nuclear fusion. Hot winds continued to swirl above, burning all the plants and animals into ashes. Everything around, whether it was the various buildings, statues, and roads made of gold, or the souls of the Incas who lived here, all disappeared without a trace. All that was left were lumps of liquid gold that had not yet completely cooled. However, in the crater, Goddess Bacui did not die. Instead, she wrapped herself in an incomparably clear ball of water, successfully blocking the power of the nuclear explosion. Of course, she was not unscathed. The right half of her body was almost completely vaporized, and there were abnormal black burn marks at the edges. Golden blood that contained divinity kept dripping from a wound. Clearly, the mysterious substance that looked like water was not real water, but a powerful artifact. As a god born from mortals, she was actually just a small goddess of the lake at the beginning. That's right, it was Lake Titicaca, which the Incas had previously regarded as a sacred place. It was now called Lake Guadavid. As for the title of ancestral goddess, it was added after she was accepted by the sun god, Inti. Since she was the goddess of the lake, her control over water was naturally not weak. In particular, she had obtained the natural treasure that was originally hidden in the deepest part of Lake Guadavid. Then, she fused it with her own power and finally created this thing called pure divine water. If not for this thing absorbing most of the energy produced at the instant of the explosion, she would have probably evaporated into gas under the terrifying temperature. God was never as omnipotent as people thought. If there was someone who preached that their God was omnipotent, that he was the supreme creator of the world or even the universe, then he was either an idiot who did not know anything or a complete liar. When Bacui struggled to jump out of the crater and saw the desolate scene in front of her, she immediately roared in anger. "Bastards! These damned invaders! My city of gold, the dreamland that I created with my own hands. It's destroyed just like that." Just as she was hysterically venting the intense emotions in her heart, a hammer-shaped electric light suddenly fell from the sky. It smashed down with a bang, instantly producing a large area of dazzling white electric light. Fortunately, the pure divine water was still wrapped around his body and successfully absorbed a large portion of the damage. Otherwise, with his current state, even if he didn't die, he would be half crippled. It was obvious that the person who threw the hammer-shaped lightning bolt was none other than Lafren, who had just passed through the Black Gate. Due to the power of the nuclear warhead explosion just now, even on the other side of the portal, they could still feel the destructive power. That was why he gave up on guarding the entrance and came over to see what was going on. As a result, the first thing he saw was the injured goddess. Without thinking, he took the initiative to attack. God's descendant, Bacui narrowed his eyes, looking wary. "Good morning, respected goddess. Can you tell me what happened here, and where did my allies go?" Lafren cautiously probed as he quickly gathered his strength to launch his next attack. But just as they looked at each other without saying a word, Faust finally leaped over a distance of tens of kilometers. He suddenly swooped down from above and stared at the other party like a hungry wolf. "You really didn't die? Very good. Very good. Looks like I'm about to get my hands on the research material I've been dreaming of." As soon as he finished speaking, his slightly thin body began to emit black smoke. After a while, a huge shadow wearing a cloak formed behind him. Lafren seemed to know the power of this shadow and immediately retreated to a safe distance. At the same time, he asked loudly, "Old friend, before we fight, can you tell me what's going on here and where did Zhang and his subordinates go? Don't worry, our allies are fine. In fact, what you see now was caused by him. Do you know? You used to say that I was a little too crazy, but today I realize that there are people in the world who are crazier than I am." Faust replied meaningfully. "You mean Zhang?" Lafren's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. That's right. Can you believe it? He detonated a nuclear warhead without thinking, without hesitation, without considering the consequences. I have to say that the best decision you've ever made in your life was to pull him into our camp. I can't imagine how terrible it would be if we became enemies with such a guy one day." When he said this, the corners of Faust's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a chilling and twisted smile. "What? Nuclear warhead? Is he crazy?" The Supreme Council Joint Conference has strictly prohibited any residents of the underground world from producing, storing, or using that thing. Once it's discovered, no matter who it is, they will be besieged from all over the world. Lafren's voice trembled slightly. At this moment, he realized how wrong he was when he thought he understood the other party. Believe me, if such a day comes, he won't mind dragging the entire world to destruction. In a way, he and I are the same kind of people. Okay, let's stop chatting. You'd better stay away. I don't want to accidentally hurt you." The moment the last word came out, Faust immediately raised his left hand and made a chopping motion at the goddess. The huge shadow behind him also swung the giant axe in its hand and slammed it forward. In an instant, surging death energy gushed out and completely enveloped the target. Botchwai couldn't dodge at all. She could only continue to support the holy water in an attempt to block the attack. However, she obviously didn't understand the uniqueness of death energy, especially the special death energy created by Faust, who was known as the most powerful necromancer. In just a few seconds, her body and appearance began to age. She went from looking like she was in her 20s to a middle-aged woman in her 40s. There were even wrinkles on many parts of her skin. After all, Botchwai was a goddess, a true goddess who would never age or die. But now, someone had actually destroyed the immortal cells in her body, causing her to walk towards the end of her life like a mortal. For a moment, an indescribable panic inevitably welled up in her heart. You solved the mystery of death." "Solved? No, I integrated the mystery of death into myself. I am the only spokesperson of death in this world." Faust replied coldly. Chapter 719. Spokesperson of Death? This title sounds very powerful. It was unknown when Zhang Cheng had teleported back, but he was standing beside Lafren as he teased with a faint smile on his face. "It's very powerful. Do you know what that huge shadow behind Faust is? It's the manifestation of the death energy of the entire world. Apart from those death gods who have disappeared for God knows how many years, he's the only mortal who has this kind of power," Lafren explained with a serious face. "The manifestation of the death energy? You're talking about the rule of death." Zhang Cheng suddenly realized something, and his eyes flashed with a strange light. Lafren replied without thinking, "That's right. It's the rule of death. But as far as I know, he still can't fully control this power. Once he gets excited, he'll lose himself and attack everything around him indiscriminately until he reaps enough lives. So don't go near him, or you'll definitely be affected." "That's the principle." Zhang Cheng nodded thoughtfully. There was no doubt that death was not only a powerful force, but also a basic rule that existed in every world. It was neither good nor evil. It only maintained the balance between life and death. Anyone who understood or mastered this power could take thousands of lives with a wave of their hand. Even the gods were not spared. As the saying went, nothing in the world was truly eternal. Even the vast and boundless universe would eventually be destroyed one day. So the so-called immortality of the gods was only relative to mortals. In the face of the rule of death, they also had to pay the price. It was just that compared to mortals who had shorter lives, they could resist for a longer time. But what puzzled Zhang Cheng was how a necromancer could obtain the rule of death. Normally, mortals would not be able to withstand this level of power and would be killed in an instant. Of course, he was not stupid enough to ask questions that involved the deepest secrets of others. He simply shut his mouth and observed with his own eyes. Faust obviously did not notice this. He kept controlling the huge shadow behind him to attack the goddess. As the frequency of attacks increased, his mental state was obviously affected. He became more and more indifferent and emotionless. In the end, his eyes even reflected a dim gray light. No, you can't kill me. I am a descendant of the great sun god Indi. If I die, he won't let you guys off when he wakes up. While desperately resisting the erosion of the rule of death, Bachwai screamed in panic, tried to use the name of the sun god to intimidate his opponent. Unfortunately, the three of them had already made up their minds. Even if they had to become enemies with the gods, they had to achieve their ambitions. No matter what she said, it was useless. Left with no other choice, the goddess finally made up her mind to fight to the death. She raised the jade green liquid ball in her hand and shouted in the ancient Incan language, "Great and sacred lake water, please heed my call. Show me your true form." Voila! As soon as he finished speaking, the entire liquid sphere expanded rapidly, and in less than 5 seconds, it became a huge water elemental life form that was more than 4 stories tall. It was so powerful that its entire body flowed with pure, divine water. Ordinary physical attacks and spells would probably only cause 1/10 of the damage. What was even more terrifying was that under the effect of divinity, it could continuously transform any form of energy into the water it needed. Unless it could be killed in an instant, it would not take long for it to recover to its original state. Go, kill these intruders for me. Bachwai ordered straightforwardly. Voila, voila. Along with the fierce surging of water, the huge water elemental life form instantly rushed in front of the necromancer, and from its body, it spat out high-pressure water knives that covered all directions. Puff, puff, puff. Faust was cut into more than a dozen pieces in a second. Damn it, go help him. Otherwise, this guy will lose control again. Lafren saw this scene and immediately became a little anxious. As you wish. Zhangqing knew that this was not the time to joke. He immediately took out half of the golden sundial that he had kept for a long time, absorbed the light emitted by the small sun in the sky, and shot it at the huge water elemental. A dazzling golden light flashed, and a large amount of water vapor was suddenly evaporated into gas by the high temperature. The volume of the water elemental also shrank to 4/5 of its original size. Such shocking lethality immediately angered the simple-minded water elemental. It left Faust, who was recovering from his injuries, and went straight to where Zhangqing was. This thing has always been in your hands. Lafren was slightly surprised. Why is it strange? Don't forget, I was the one who took care of that matter. After saying that, Zhangqing once again raised the golden sundial and shot out a scorching strong light, continuing to weaken the power of the water elemental. This was because he knew that as long as he depleted the water in the body of this summoned elemental life form, it would immediately lose its ability to move and return to its original form. As for a head-on clash, he was not so foolish as to give up his greatest advantage. Using the short-distance teleportation spell, Zhangqing did not expend much effort to kill this powerful summoned life form that should have been very difficult to deal with. At the same time, Faust on the other side had also completed the killing of Bachwai. After all, this goddess, who was originally the goddess of the lake, had long lost the most powerful power she had in her heyday. The glorious Incan civilization that her people had created had also perished a few hundred years ago. Looking at the deity that had fallen to the ground, and even the corpse was a little incomplete, Lafren's eyes shone with excitement and anticipation. He was the first to speak. I need the remaining divinity in the corpse. At least half of it. I want the corpse and the other half of the divinity. Faust also made his own request. He seemed to have not gotten rid of the influence of the rules of death. His tone was full of coldness, as if he could turn hostile at any time. All right, it seems that I can only take this interesting little thing, but you have to give me some compensation," Zhang Cheng said as he played with the cold liquid ball in his hand. "What compensation do you want?" Seeing that Zhang Cheng did not insist on fighting for the divinity, Lafern was obviously relieved, and a faint smile appeared on his face again. One had to know that in his inherent longing, divinity was the most precious thing in the body of a god. It was a treasure that could not be exchanged for no matter what. I haven't thought about it yet. Perhaps you can give me a list of options when we return." Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. To be honest, he really did not think much of a third-rate god like Ba Chuai, who was extremely weak and relied on faith to gain power. "No problem." Agreed. Faust and Lafern did not even consider it before giving an affirmative answer. Chapter 720. After confirming how the most important spoils of war would be distributed, Lafern asked with a serious face, "Dear Zhang, I just heard from Faust that you detonated a nuclear warhead just now." "Yes. Is there a problem?" Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly, as if he didn't take this matter to heart at all. "Of course there's a problem. Don't tell me you don't know the decree of the Joint Conference of the Supreme Council?" Lafern leaned forward slightly, trying to make himself look more oppressive. As a cautious person, the last thing he wanted to see was to provoke powerful enemies for no reason, especially a behemoth like the Supreme Council that had influence in every corner of the world. Looking at the warning in the other party's eyes, Zhang Cheng replied with a smile, "I know. But are you sure you want to take it seriously? Don't forget what we are doing now and what the purpose of the Supreme Council is. To some extent, our ambitions and goals are fundamentally in conflict with the philosophy of the Supreme Council. This also means that one day we will become enemies that will not rest until one of us is dead. Because the Supreme Council represents preservation and conservatism, while we represent subversion and transcendence." "Old friend, he's right. You value the Supreme Council too much, and you've even forgotten why you chose to join the Supreme Council in the first place. We're not doing it for power or wealth, but as a convenient tool, an important channel to obtain information and resources, that's all." Faust also echoed, "Damn it. That doesn't mean we have to go to war with the Supreme Council now. It's almost no different from going against half of the world." Lafern couldn't help but frown and complain. There was no doubt that the three-man alliance in front of him was a combination of interests. Whether it was in character or philosophy, there was a huge difference between each of them. Go to war? I didn't say that we should go to war with the Supreme Council now. On the contrary, I'm a member of the Supreme Council like you, and I have great power and wealth. What I mean is that we could disintegrate the North American Supreme Council from the inside and make it what we want it to be. Also, regarding the use of nuclear warheads, do you think I haven't considered the consequences? No, I thought about it. Since our next battle is likely to take place in another dimension or fragment world, the possibility of a nuclear explosion attracting the attention of the outside world is very low. Zhang Cheng explained calmly. Of course, he didn't say the truth that was hidden in his heart. In fact, there was another purpose for collecting nuclear weapons, and that was to directly trigger a thermonuclear war on a global scale when there was no other choice, quickly reducing the human population to less than 1/30th of the original. Through this method, not only could they severely injure the gods who relied on faith to obtain power, but they could also obtain a huge amount of soul resources. Most importantly, if the largest group of intelligent life on this planet entered the countdown to extinction, God would definitely not ignore it. Their energy and attention would undoubtedly be greatly diverted. Transform the highest council. Lafern was slightly surprised. He simply couldn't believe that Zhang Cheng's ambition was so great that he actually wanted to pry open the ancient system that had followed for hundreds of years. At this moment, Faust seemed to have broken free from the image of the precepts of death. He pursed his lips and teased, "Why not? I think this is a very great idea. Think about it. If Speaker Cosmo were to die now, who would be qualified to control the North American Supreme Council? Those idiots who only know how to fight for power and profit? No, only you have such qualifications. When one of you sits in the position of speaker, I can start to hunt down those counselors one by one and make them into zombies. As long as we are fast enough, We can definitely get rid of all the counselors before anyone notices that something is wrong. Then we can control the entire underground world of North America through these zombies." Zhang Chung smiled and completed the last sentence. Lafern touched his chin, his eyes flashing with a strange light, as if he was considering the feasibility of the plan and the risks to be taken. After about 5 or 6 minutes, he finally took a deep breath and refused. "That's too radical. Especially Speaker Cosmo. He's not an easy guy to deal with. What's more, you think the only people we need to deal with are the counselors of the Supreme Council. No, we still have to deal with the ancient families and the Wizard Association in North America. At least before I have about 90% confidence, I will never take this risk. But regarding the use of nuclear warheads, I agree with Zhang. There is no problem using them in a different space or a fragment world." What a conservative old man. Faust was obviously not satisfied with this answer. He shook his head and muttered in a low voice, "Whatever you say, I won't agree anyway." Well, the discussion on this topic ends here. I'm going to disappear for a while to digest this divinity. If there's nothing important, it's best not to disturb me. After saying this, Lafern turned and walked through the portal, disappearing from the sight of the other two. I also have to go back and study the corpse of this god. Do you have anything else to say? Faust licked his lips, his pupils bursting with chilling excitement and expectation. "No, don't forget to help me deal with the Spanish government. You know I hate trouble that can't be solved." Zhang Chung shrugged. Don't worry. If I can't even handle such a small matter, how can I live? As for the compensation, I'll ask the servant to send you a list in a few days. Just pick whatever you like, don't be shy." As soon as he finished speaking, Faust grabbed the corpse of the goddess Batui, jumped through the portal, and disappeared without a trace. Seeing that the two old men had left, Zhang Chung relaxed a little and asked without looking back, "Silner, have you found that thing?" "Of course, master. Look, it's here." Accompanied by a familiar voice, the elven huntress slowly walked out of her hiding place, revealing a strangely shaped golden scepter. "Great! My two short-sighted allies would never have thought that the most precious thing in the City of Gold is not the goddess at all, but this scepter that the sun god Ini once used." Zhang Chung took the scepter and held it in his hand, feeling the powerful power contained in it. In the myths and legends, it was this golden scepter that sent the direct descendants of the sun god to the earth and created the glorious Incan civilization later on. Of course, whether these legends were true or not, he didn't care at all. What really interested him was one of the scepter's abilities, the ability to control the small sun in the sky. When the end of the scepter with the sun symbol was aimed at the sky, the small sun hanging above the City of Gold shook violently. Then, as if attracted by some mysterious force, it quickly lowered its height and finally hovered less than a meter away from the scepter. Chapter 721. Unbelievable. I can't even feel the slightest bit of temperature. Zhang Chung stretched out his arm towards the giant golden fireball above his head as he muttered to himself. Even though this smaller sun seemed to be only the size of a grown man's palm from afar, it was actually the size of a house if one were to get closer. When it got closer, the gold that was gradually solidifying around it once again melted into a boiling hot liquid, and the ground emitted a pungent, burnt smell. Obviously, it was not that this thing had no temperature, but the golden scepter allowed the wielder to avoid being directly vaporized into a gaseous state by the terrifying heat. The elven female demonic hunter seemed to be unable to bear the burden of the rapidly rising temperature on her body. She immediately spread her wings and glided back for more than 200 meters, staring in horror at the scene before her that was beyond her comprehension. After a full 10 minutes, Zhangqing finally understood the connection between the scepter and the small sun and began to try to control it. Soon, the giant fireball gradually shrunk, and shrunk again. Finally, it became the size of a tennis ball, highly condensed with positive energy, and with a snap, it was embedded into the sun-shaped hollow groove at the top of the scepter. Instantly, the golden scepter emitted a blinding light, and the originally inconspicuous patterns on its surface seemed to have been activated, splitting into metal strips of different sizes, and then reconstructing its external form. After about half a minute, it shrank from a scepter that was more than a meter long to a golden bracer. If not for the gemstone that flashed with golden light on the bracer from time to time, perhaps no one would ever associate it with the golden scepter. Without a doubt, this was a divine artifact that had been used by the sun god Inti in the Incan mythological system, and this was the embodiment of its complete form. Kachuk, accompanied by the crisp sound of a buckle, the bracer was put on his right wrist. Instantly, a warm and encouraging energy flowed through his body, through his blood circulation. Zhang Cheng tried to raise a finger and gathered the energy at the tip of his finger. The next second, whoosh! The blinding golden energy was like a laser and quickly cut a trench that was several meters deep on the ground before him. It finally stopped after 2 or 3 seconds after the energy supply was cut off. Looking at the ground that had been cut in front of him, he could not help but smile. He smiled and nodded in satisfaction. Not bad. This is worthy of the title of divine artifact. Unlike that piece of crudely made trash, it's simply an insult to the word divine artifact. While they were talking, the alternate space where the city of gold was located suddenly shook violently, followed by a loud rumbling sound. In just a few minutes, both the sky and the ground showed signs of collapsing. In the distance, some places that had already collapsed already revealed a bottomless black void. There was no doubt that the small sun floating in the sky was the core that maintained the existence and operation of this world. Once it was gone, the entire world would enter the countdown to its destruction. However, due to the relatively large area, the collapse would last for a period of time, perhaps a few days, a few weeks, or a few months. In any case, it would definitely not exceed a year. However, for Zhang Cheng, this place had lost its value. Therefore, he took Silner through the portal and returned to the bottom of Guadavita Lake. Without any hesitation, he directly destroyed the golden mural used to open the portal and directly teleported back to the town before the lake water covered everything. Then, he hired a car and drove straight to Peru in the south. Leaning against the back of the slightly dirty SUV's back seat, he chatted with the driver in Spanish while he contacted Yelena, who was looking for a girl with Incan priestly blood, through his cell phone. After a few hours of long-distance travel, he finally arrived safely at an important city in southern Peru, Arequipa. Although it was neither very prosperous nor had many high-rise buildings, and the population was only a few 100,000, it still retained a considerable number of ancient buildings from the Spanish colonial period. After sending off the driver with a beard with $300, Yelena immediately lowered her voice and reported, "Boss, I have found a few suitable targets. Here are the photos and information. Which one do you think is more suitable?" "Oh, you found it so quickly." Zhang Cheng glanced at the detailed information on the other party's cell phone screen in surprise. Yes, this was originally the birthplace of the Incan Empire. Although it has been enslaved and massacred for a long time, the number of indigenous residents is not small. Coupled with the poverty, you can get everything you want by spending a little more money, Yelena explained in a low voice. The entire Latin American region was basically a standard resource exporting country. Moreover, whether it was agricultural products or natural resources, the pricing power was not in their own hands. Not to mention the pricing power, some were directly controlled by multinational corporations and financial groups. Even if the economic data seemed to be passable on the surface, the money that fell into the hands of the ordinary residents was not much. Under such conditions, it would be strange if the Latin American region could rise, and Peru was no exception. Well done. Bring all the girls here and let Taxima choose for herself. Oh, by the way, it's best not to use violence. I don't want to see bloodshed, understand? After saying this, Zhang Cheng walked straight into the hotel room that he had booked. He planned to eat some local delicacies to relax his tense nerves. Violence? No, boss, here, dollars are much more useful than pure violence. Yelena left a meaningful look and got into a car. She stepped on the accelerator, intending to get this done before dark. Of course, she did not tell these girls and their parents and relatives that she was going to choose a new body for a priestess who had broken the seal in ancient times. Instead, she lied to them about the opportunity to go to the United States. In the entire Latin American region, no citizen of any country could resist the opportunity to go to the country of freedom, regardless of whether they were smuggled in or not, and regardless of whether they could get a legal identity certificate. At the same time, far away in the depths of the virgin forest in Alaska, the people behind the scenes in the United States had gathered more than 3,000 elite veterans and professional bodyguards who had drunk the evolution potion. With the help of scientific summary and classification, these people began to systematically learn the magic and martial arts knowledge obtained from Zhang Cheng. They only had one purpose, and that was to create an army that could resist the attack of the Supreme Council in a short period of time. In addition to the learning and training of supernatural powers, these trainees also took into account the thermal weapon system. They even tried to add magic elements to guns, bullets, missiles, bombs, and other things. Perhaps from the perspective of the underground world, these knots were still very crude, but in time, they would inevitably make great strides forward. Chapter 722. Igor Hamilton, who was half vampire and half human, was now at the highest point of the entire secret base, looking down at his subordinates who were either studying or training. After about a minute or two, he asked without looking back, "How is it? Is the latest statistical report out?" "It's out, boss." "Do you want to hear it now?" A Caucasian woman in her 40s wearing a business suit hurriedly stood up. "Of course." Igor nodded without hesitation. There are now 1,100 strength-type enhancers in the base, nearly a quarter of which have physical test data more than 20 times that of ordinary people, and it is still growing. In addition, there are 800 magic talent enhancers, about 130 of whom have completed the basic course and can release some powerful spells. As for the rest, they are either agility-type enhancers or compound-type enhancers. The researchers are still testing them for the time being. The woman gave the answer as fast as she could. "It sounds like the progress is fast, but it's not enough. Remember, my request is to create an elite force that can 100% obey orders and withstand the attack of the North American Supreme Council within half a year." Igor made the request with a serious expression. It was not that he was too impatient, but for anyone who lived in fear under the shadow of the Supreme Council, they would be impatient and eager to get the power to protect themselves. The woman obviously knew that now was not the time to argue, so she bent down and responded with a slight bow. "Understood. Please rest assured, within half a year, I promise that you will have a powerful army that can be thrown into the underground war at any time." When Igor heard this, a satisfied expression suddenly appeared on his face. "Very good. I believe you won't let me down. In addition, the person I ordered you to pay attention to last time, is there any new movement recently?" "Yes. I just received a report here. He went out to salvage several sunken ships some time ago, but I don't know why he didn't return with the ships. Instead, he returned to New York alone 3 days ago and met with another heavyweight. Then, early this morning, both of them disappeared on a yacht in the port area. After that, the woman pulled out a few pages of reports with photos from the folder in her arms and handed them over." "Laffern? Salvaging sunken ships?" Igor narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself in a low voice, falling into a state of contemplation. After a full 5 minutes, he raised his head and ordered in a resolute tone, "Find it for me, using all resources and means. Their whereabouts must be found within 5 hours. I can feel that they must be carrying out some particularly important secret operations, and they are hiding it from the North American Supreme Council. Yes, I'll give the order immediately. Also, don't let the other party find out. These two big shots aren't people you can deal with right now. Especially the young one, who is our most important ally at this stage. I don't want to turn him into an enemy." Just as Igor was using all the resources at hand to find the location of the two, the sky in the city of Arequipa in southern Peru had already darkened. Zhang Cheng was sitting on a deck chair on the balcony, enjoying the beautiful sunset while tasting the freshly squeezed local juice. He looked so relaxed. Behind him, Takinma's consciousness had already taken over the soul of a 17-year-old girl. He was carrying out further modifications and merging with the girl's body. About 20 minutes later, the priestess from more than 1,000 years ago finally finished all her work. She came to the balcony in a light spaghetti strap skirt and said with a smile, "I'm very happy that you fulfilled your promise so quickly. This temporary body is very suitable for me. It can carry at least 1/10 of my power. I'm glad you like it." Zhang Cheng raised the glass bottle full of juice and poured a glass of juice for the other party. "Thank you." Takima lifted her long black hair and took the initiative to sit on another deck chair next to the table. Her eyes never left the transformed wristband of the sun scepter. As a priestess, it was naturally impossible for her not to know the story about the sun god Inti and the City of Gold. To be exact, the time when the City of Gold was completed was not too long before she was born. Combined with the information she gave not long ago, it was easy to guess what this seemingly ordinary decoration meant. Zhang Cheng undoubtedly noticed this too. He showed it openly and pretended to be casual as he probed, "Are you interested in my new wristband?" "Wristband? Hee hee. Do you think I can't recognize the second form of the sun scepter?" The priestess asked with a faint smile. "Oh, so you know. Then why didn't you tell me before?" Zhang Cheng stared into the other party's eyes. As he did not have a sense of trust in anyone, he was always subconsciously vigilant, feeling that the other party was hiding some ulterior motive. Takima did not seem to care about the offense in her words at all. She continued to explain, "It is said that the City of Gold was first built under the will of the sun god Inti. It took a few hundred years to barely complete. The subsequent decorations and improvements never stopped. According to the results of my investigation, the original purpose of building it was definitely not as advertised. It was definitely not to protect the direct descendants of the sun god, but to satisfy the ambition of a goddess who thirsted for power." "You mean the souls of the Incas in the City of Gold are actually raw materials used to transform energy?" "The scepter itself is a transformation tool, and the small sun in the sky is an energy storage device." Zhang Cheng was obviously shocked. He subconsciously touched the protruding golden gem on the wristband. "That's right. In order to be able to borrow the power of the sun god, that bastard secretly borrowed the sun scepter left behind to create a kingdom under his control. Since the sun scepter is now in your hands, then the creator of the City of Gold must be dead, right?" When she said this, the priestess' tone revealed an undisguised gloating. There was no need to ask to know that there was an extremely deep grudge between the two. "Yes, my allies and I killed her. By the way, do you have a grudge against her?" "Grudge? No, the relationship between us is not that simple. More than 1,000 years ago, I was even willing to give up everything, including my soul, in exchange for her destruction. Bachwai is a sinner of the Incas. She personally pushed us into the bottomless abyss in exchange for her immortality." "Interesting. So, you were imprisoned because you resisted? I don't understand. Why didn't she kill you once and for all?" "She wouldn't kill me so easily. Instead, she wanted to tame me by imprisoning me and make me serve her like a pitiful slave. But unfortunately, I have never truly submitted and will never submit." Chapter 723. Perhaps it was because he had just obtained an excellent new body, or perhaps he had finally escaped from his prison. In short, Takima seemed to be in a good mood today, and even took the initiative to reveal some secrets of the ancient Inca era. Through the conversation, Zhang Cheng understood that the mythological era of the American Indian region was much later than the mythological era of other parts of the world. It could be said that the gods of other regions began to disappear, and the first generation of gods here began to suddenly appear. He had enough reason to suspect that these gods actually came from other parts of the world and had just experienced a tragic war with heaven and hell. But for some unknown reason, they all came to this land that was still in the primitive era and changed their appearances to usurp the beliefs of the native Indians. Other than that, the gods of the American region were particularly bloodthirsty, and all of them require believers to frequently offer the blood and souls of living people. It was as if they were using all methods to recover after being severely injured. Of course, all of this was Zhang Cheng's deduction, and he had to see it with his own eyes to come to a conclusion. But even so, it was much better than just relying on guesses previously. Information. It had always been one of the most important factors in determining victory or defeat. As long as he could know the enemy's personality, habits, weaknesses, and tactics in advance, he would naturally be able to formulate a targeted strategy. Even if there was a difference in strength between the two sides, he could easily defeat the stronger side. Admiring Takinma, who was acting like a young Indian girl, Zhang Cheng asked with a smile, "What plans do you have next?" Plans? A hint of melancholy appeared on the priestess' face, and she quickly shook her head lightly. "It's been more than 1,000 years, and the world has changed too much. I need some time to adapt. Before that, I believe you wouldn't mind having more followers by your side, right? After all, other than you, I can't find a second person I can trust." "Oh, you want to be by my side?" "I have to say, that's not a good idea, because I'm not a law-abiding person, and I often face all kinds of hostility and trouble. Are you sure you want to put yourself in danger?" Zhang Cheng purposely made his tone sound uncertain. It was obvious that he didn't want this stranger of unknown origin to stay by his side until he saw the other party's true identity. "Don't worry, not only am I not afraid of danger and trouble, but I'm also very good at dealing with them. Furthermore, don't you want to know more about the secrets of the Inca Empire? I can give you a lot of clues about the sleeping gods and their hiding places. Trust me, there are countless things that you're interested in hidden in this vast rainforest." Takima bent down and whispered into Zhang Cheng's ear. The priestess was not a fool. She could feel the vigilance and power of the young man in front of her. After all, being able to break into the city of gold and kill Goddess Bachu was definitely not something an ordinary person could do. Therefore, in order to win his trust, she knew that she had to take a risk. At the very least, she had to observe Zhang Cheng's character for a long time before deciding whether or not she should let him help her break the strong cage. After being imprisoned and tortured for 1,000 years, she had become very vigilant. She didn't dare to trust a stranger too much. "What if I'm interested in you?" Without any warning, Zhang Cheng suddenly extended his right hand and pinched Takima's smooth chin. His pupils emitted an aggressive light. "It's my honor." Without saying a word, the priestess took off her thin, short skirt, revealing the naked body of the Native American girl. Her actions were so bold that she didn't feel shy or embarrassed at all. Seeing this scene, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but laugh. As he laughed, he shook his head and explained, No, I think you misunderstood something. What I'm interested in is not the body that you've occupied, but your real body that you've been imprisoned in. I'm very curious. What kind of power do you have that those gods can't bear to kill you?" "Ha! Don't worry, powerful man. I'll give you the answer someday in the future, but not now. Now I just want to relive the joy of a woman. Shouldn't you fulfill this small wish of mine?" Takinma hinted meaningfully. "I'm sorry, madam. Although I really want to fulfill your small wish, the problem is that time doesn't allow it. There's an uninvited guest who just walked into this hotel half a minute ago. If there's no accident..." Bang, bang, bang. Before Zhang Cheng could finish his words, there was a knock on the door of the room. "Boss, there's a guy who calls himself Igor Hamilton who wants to meet you. He says he's your friend." In addition, the men that I arranged to keep watch around were all attacked by unknown people. According to the other party, they were knocked unconscious. Yelena's urgent voice came through the gap of the door. Obviously, the sudden turn of events made her very nervous, so much so that she forgot what kind of person she was loyal to. "Let him wait for me in the lobby downstairs. Don't panic, this guy is not an enemy, at least not now," Zhang Cheng ordered without hesitation. In fact, from a moment this half-vampire entered the hotel door, he had been discovered by his increasingly powerful perception. However, what he couldn't understand was why this old guy who controlled the United States in the dark came all the way to Peru. Although Latin America could not escape the influence and control of the United States in terms of economy, military, and politics, the South American Supreme Council in the underground world was not weaker than North America at all. In particular, the Iberian Peninsula used to be under the control of the Arabs for a long time, so the supernatural forces were integrated with the very ancient and mysterious contents of the Middle East and North Africa. After the independence of Spain, these people with mysterious powers were not expelled. Instead, they were absorbed by the local supernatural organizations and became the first pioneers to set foot on the American continent. In the wars that followed, they seized a large number of precious manuscripts and knowledge from the Inca, Mayan, and Aztec civilizations again and again, slowly forming a unique system in the South American continent. In contrast, North America was far less fortunate. By the time the Supreme Council was established, there were not many targets that could be plundered and integrated. What was more interesting was that the South American Supreme Council had always been at odds with the ancient European Parliament. Unlike the North American Supreme Council, who had a close relationship with Europe and often cooperated with each other. I smell the scent of the fallen. You want to see this monster that feeds on blood? Takima wrinkled her nose and showed a disapproving expression. Obviously, her senses toward vampires were not good at all. It could even be described as disgust. Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders indifferently and retorted, "Don't be so narrow-minded. I told you before that this world has long become a place where interests are paramount. Race, skin color, good and evil, gender, religion, beauty and ugliness are all not important. As long as a person can bring me enough benefits, even if his hands are stained with the blood of innocence, I will still be very happy to welcome him with open arms." Chapter 724. As soon as he arrived at the lobby on the first floor, Zhang Cheng saw the half-vampire sitting on the sofa in the corner. He walked directly to him and greeted him in a flat tone. "Good evening, dear friend. Can you please explain how you know I'm here, and why did you come all the way to Peru?" "Good evening, sir. Please give me a few minutes, and I will give you a reasonable explanation." Igor Hamilton stood up and bowed slightly. At the same time, he motioned for his men to leave first. After all, a dozen men in suits with serious faces appearing in the small town of Arequipa was already conspicuous enough. He didn't want to attract unnecessary attention. "You have 5 minutes." Zhang Cheng straightforwardly gave a very short time limit. "Thank you very much. Before we start, I want you to take a look at this information." Igor Hamilton quickly handed over a file. He was undoubtedly very clear that if the young man in front of him was not satisfied with his next answer, then what awaited him would be a disaster. So he was very humble and cooperative. Zhang Cheng took it and flipped through it. He found that it was a list of nuclear warheads from 1983 to the present in the UA. It recorded in detail the number of nuclear warheads destroyed by the UA in various ways after the two camps reached an agreement to supervise each other's destruction of nuclear weapons. But what was interesting was that some of the hydrogen bomb warheads that were marked as destroyed were circled with a red pen. It was obvious that there was some little secret behind it that could not be revealed. Thinking of this, he immediately raised his head and asked with a smile, "Don't tell me that these nuclear warheads are in your hands." That's a total of 60 hydrogen bombs with yields ranging from 8 to 23 megatons. You guessed right. These hydrogen bombs marked as scrapped are indeed in our hands. Initially, we only intended to use them as a trump card and use them as bargaining chips when the council began to liquidate. But since you need them, we are very happy to share them. 40 of them have been shipped to a farm warehouse in the outskirts of New York. I have handled the transfer of ownership of the farm. It will be under your name in the future, so you don't have to worry about attracting attention. While speaking, Igor Hamilton had been carefully observing Zhang Cheng's reaction, trying to read something from the faint smile on his face from beginning to end. Unfortunately, not long after, he chose to give up. The reason was very simple. No matter how good a person was at reading people's expressions, it was impossible for them to see through a completely unchanged expression. Holding this list that was enough to cause panic on a global scale, Zhang Cheng's eyes revealed a meaningful light. After a full minute, he said, 60? You guys are really hiding an incredible trump card. Tell me, if the highest council is going to take action, what are the odds of them being useful to you? Igor Hamilton shook his head with a wry smile. I don't know. The highest council was too powerful. I didn't know if I had the power to negotiate or counterattack at all. It is also because of this that we are eager to obtain more and more powerful supernatural powers. That's right. Looks like he's not that stupid. Remember, do not try to use these nuclear warheads. Otherwise, what awaits you will be annihilation. and I guarantee that you won't even have a chance to detonate a single nuclear warhead, Zhang Qing warned with a sneer. Why? Igor widened his eyes in shock. Have you heard of the Joint Conference of the Supreme Council? This is an important meeting that is held every 10 years by the regional councils and the local supernatural power governing bodies all over the world. You can think of it as the United Nations of the underground world, and it is far more authoritative than the United Nations in name only. Once a decree is established at this meeting, even the North American Supreme Council cannot change it. In the year of the atomic bomb detonation, the Joint Conference of the Supreme Council issued a very important decree. Any underground world resident who attempts to manufacture, sell, or use nuclear weapons will face the highest level of pursuit. Believe me, you don't know how miserable the outcome of the people who committed this crime will be. Zhang Cheng explained with a sneer. Although he had only used one less than 10 hours ago, it did not prevent him from despising the other party for overestimating themselves. Fortunately, the members of the North American Supreme Council did not notice these private actions. Otherwise, this group of people behind the scenes in the United States of America would have been uprooted and would not have survived until now. Damn it, how come I've never heard of it? Igor's whole body trembled involuntarily. If it were not for the fact that he was half vampire and could not sweat, his clothes would have been soaked in sweat. As a person who had a deep understanding of the North American Supreme Council, he knew very well how terrifying the power this ancient and mysterious organization would release once it took action. Who do you think this decree is used to restrain? Those idiots who can't even distinguish between nuclear fusion and nuclear fission? No, it is used to restrain smart people like you and me who understand the power and value of nuclear weapons. So for your safety, immediately hand over all the nuclear warheads on hand to me for safekeeping. After talking nonsense for a long time, Zhang Qing finally revealed his true colors at this moment. That's right. A few dozen nuclear warheads could not satisfy his ambition and appetite at all. In addition, he did not believe that the mastermind behind the United States of America would have less than 100 nuclear warheads. Since the 1980s, when the Soviet Union and the United States signed an agreement to reduce nuclear weapons, in just a few decades, the arsenals of both sides were reduced by more than half. In particular, as Russia's economy declined rapidly after the collapse of the Soviet Union, its nuclear warheads dropped from 40,000 to about 10,000. Wasn't such a large-scale destruction a good opportunity to be greedy? As long as a few people in charge signed, a nuclear warhead that could originally serve for 10 years could be disposed of as scrap and secretly sent to a designated warehouse. Zhang Cheng felt that if he had such an opportunity, he would definitely not let it go easily and would definitely make a fortune. Igor was obviously frightened by the decree issued by the Supreme Council. He stood there with a gloomy expression on his face. About 2 or 3 minutes later, he sighed helplessly. Sigh? Okay, you win. Although I know you want to force me to hand over all the nuclear warheads, I don't dare to take the risk, and I also don't want to be enemies with the entire underground world. Give me a month, and I will transport the rest to the farm. Smart choice. I am not a stingy person. In return, I will give you this divine artifact. With that said, Zhang Cheng threw over the divine water that originally belonged to Bakhut. Oh my God! Igor was immediately attracted by this unknown liquid that emitted an emerald green glow, and his pupils released a red glimmer, unique to vampires when they were emotional. Chapter 725. How pure! How perfect! It's simply the most perfect creation I've ever seen in my life. And it seems to have its own independent consciousness. Igor Hamilton exclaimed excitedly as he felt the core of the pure holy water through the exterior. He had lived for so many years, but this was the first time he had seen such a powerful and precious magical item. Of course, it has its own consciousness. Do you know? This mass of liquid is actually a lake that has been worshipped by humans for a long time and is a collection of consciousness. You can think of it as an elemental life that was born from the spiritual world. If it continued to develop in this way, perhaps after a few thousand years of evolution, it would eventually become a top-notch elemental spirit with complete intelligence. Unfortunately, someone interrupted the entire process and even usurped the faith and made it into what it is now. Zhang Cheng replied casually. In the eyes of many people, the pure holy water could not only provide the wielder with 360 degrees of protection without any blind spots, but it could also be infused with magical energy to create lake water sprites with extraordinary combat power. It was simply a divine weapon that combined both attack and defense. However, the problem was that it did not have its own consciousness and needed the owner to give the corresponding orders. For a true powerhouse, they would have long used other methods to counterattack or choose to retreat strategically. Take the point of defending against a nuclear explosion as an example. Zhangqing only needed a thought to teleport himself and the people around him hundreds of kilometers away, instead of stupidly staying in the same place and being bombed. Obviously, as long as this problem was not solved, the pure holy water would not be worthy of being called a true divine weapon. Its practicality and value would also greatly decrease. This was also why when the gods of multiple worlds were allowed to create weapons, armor, and magical items, they would have a certain degree of subjective initiative and even have independent thoughts and will. However, Igor Hamilton obviously did not understand this point. Instead, he excitedly held in his hands and kept trying out. He did not even raise his head as he asked, "You mean it originally belonged to a god?" "God?" Zhang Cheng laughed disdainfully. "You can say that for now. Also, you haven't explained how you found my whereabouts. Don't tell me this is a coincidence, or I'll think you're insulting my intelligence." "Of course not. In fact, this hotel happens to be owned by one of us, so when you walk into the lobby and are captured by the surveillance equipment, the news will be sent to me in an hour at most. Please don't misunderstand. I didn't send anyone to spy on you, and I wouldn't dare to do so." Igor's tone revealed his sincerity. As a guy who made a secret deal with the vampire family in order to avoid death, he didn't want to provoke enemies that were too powerful. Even if he went against the highest council, it was only for self-protection, not for intense ambitions and purposes. If the council was willing to step forward and negotiate, he was even willing to hand over most of his rights in exchange for a free life and a colorful world. However, it was a pity that they could only negotiate with those who were on par with them. As for the weak, he could just wave his hand and crush them. After all, the dead didn't need to negotiate. They wouldn't sit down calmly like ordinary people and fight for benefits through a war of words. For the same reason, Igor was also unwilling to provoke this young man whose strength was unfathomable. Due to the bloodline of an ordinary vampire, Zhangqing obviously couldn't use his psionic ability to read the brain of the other party. He just narrowed his eyes and stared at the other party. About a minute or two later, he laughed without warning. As he laughed, he warned, "All right, I'll believe you for now. But remember, there won't be a second time." "Understood. I swear that this kind of situation will never happen again." Igor gave a promise solemnly. Just when Zhang Cheng wanted to say something, Yelena suddenly ran in from outside and whispered in his ear, "Boss, I just confirmed that our people are still alive, but the back of their heads suffered different degrees of heavy blows, and they have slight symptoms of concussion. They should be able to recover after a few hours of rest." "I'm very sorry, miss. I had no choice but to do this. Your men were too vigilant. If I didn't take them down, I wouldn't have been able to enter at all." The half-vampire's hearing was obviously several times better than a normal person's. He immediately stood up and bowed elegantly to apologize. "It's okay. Thank you for teaching my men a lesson. I believe that the next time we meet, the result will be different." Yelena suppressed her anger and squeezed out a formal smile. Her smile was so sweet and pleasant. If it weren't for the fact that she kept repeating in her heart, "I'll teach you a lesson one day. Go to hell, pretty boy." Such words, perhaps the people around them would think that there was really a small misunderstanding before, and not that they were almost wiped out by the other party's surprise attack. No, I don't want to have a second time. In order to express my sincerity, I happen to have a phone number here. If you encounter any trouble in the future, or if you need help, you can contact my men directly. He can even arrange planes and troops to take off from any U.S. military base in any corner of the world. After saying this, Igor Hamilton bowed to Zhang Chung again, then got into the car with the bodyguards waiting at the door and drove straight to the airport. Who is he? Yelena glanced at the small piece of paper in her hand and frowned subconsciously. You don't need to know too much. Just know that this guy is a very powerful person in the ordinary world. Oh, by the way, where is Silner? How come I haven't seen her all afternoon? Zhang Chung asked while touching his chin. She said she was going to visit the ancient city left by the Incan Empire. According to the time, she should be back soon. Why? Do you have something urgent? No, nothing. I just want to make sure that she is safe. You have to understand that South America is not in my sphere of influence. It may cause disputes. Yuliana seemed to understand and nodded. Then I'll send someone to pick her up now. Go. I still have some personal matters to attend to. If I don't come back in 3 days, book a ticket and send them back to New York. Also, ask Lena to go to Spain to investigate the name Camila de Silva Velasquez and the family behind the last name. Investigate carefully. I want all her information. After settling the city of gold, Zhang Chung could finally take the time to deal with the prophecy and figure out how the so-called power of destiny worked. But before that, he still needed to go to the tower to see if a door to a new world opened. As more and more fog was cleared, he felt it was time to find a place to integrate his power, especially the power of creation from the beginning, at least to the extent that he could use it freely. Chapter 726. Through the parchment scroll, Zhang Chung came to the front of the towering spire. The first thing he saw was the statue Rosen taking care of a group of newborn dragons. The parents of these little guys were none other than the descendants of the princess of the Black Dragon, Onyxia, and Kulokelba. In just a few short months, nearly 1/30th of the tens of thousands of dragon eggs had hatched. They were flying around this place in the spatial crevice in groups. The earliest batch had even grown to more than 4 meters in size. They could easily hunt large animals such as deer, wild boars, cows, and sheep. Fortunately, he had considered the problem of food back then and had built a few random summoning gates, continuously teleporting harmless beasts from any of the connected worlds. Otherwise, it would be impossible to feed so many baby dragons whose appetites were increasing by the day with just the little land around the tower. Without a doubt, these endless dragon eggs and baby dragons were an army prepared for a full-scale invasion of hell in the future, an army that could destroy the last resistance of the demons in an instant. War. It was never a game that could be started with a pat on the head. Instead, it was a process that required long-term preparation and careful planning. It could only be launched when there was enough confidence. Looking at the Axis powers of World War II, almost none of them had truly completed their preparations for war. It was simply a joke to think that they could win the war. What was even more ridiculous was that after more than half a century, there were still many idiots who felt sorry for the failure of the Third Reich. They were completely unaware of the huge strategic mistake that the Mustache Man had made. Among them, the most typical was the whimsical Navy shipbuilding Plan Z and the so-called brilliant U-boat deep-sea hunting plan. Just these two alone had consumed a large amount of Nazi Germany's war resources. In the end, they did not obtain the corresponding strategic advantage. Instead, they became a heavy burden and waste. In addition, after the surrender of France, the Third Reich once had the best and most complete industrial system and military equipment production capacity in all of Europe, but they were not able to make good use of it. It could be said that Nazi Germany's defeat was almost destined from the beginning. No matter how elite the German soldiers were or how brave they were in battle, they could not change the destined outcome. After the war, when the President of the United States saw some of Germany's plans, he could not help but sigh that the opponent was simply treating the war as a game and did not treat the war with a serious attitude. As a person who was good at learning and summarizing lessons, Zhang Chung did not want to follow in the footsteps of the former. Therefore, even though there were millions of burning Legion demons and even more than a dozen powerful demon lords stored in the Demon Commanding Tome, he was not in a hurry to start the plan to conquer hell. Instead, he methodically expanded his air forces and strived to take down the enemy in one wave instead of falling into a protracted battle and giving other forces a chance to get involved. Master, you are here. Rosen struggled to break free from the group of noisy dragon fledglings and quickly ran over. A slightly awkward smile appeared on his square metal face. It had to be said that as a metallic construct created by magic and unknown forces, its emotions were a little too rich. How have you been recently? Zhang Cheng looked at the big guy in front of him with interest. Not bad. It's just that these newborn babies are a little irritable and always try to tear off some meat for me to eat. But you know that my body is made of the strongest magical metal, so I often knock off their fragile baby teeth. If possible, I would like to create a softer protective suit for myself. Rosen was like a nanny, and his tone revealed the potential of a standard war man. Zhangqing naturally would not reject such a small request. He immediately nodded. Of course, I said that you can use the resources in the tower as you wish. Also, are there any new portals that have been opened recently? I would like to choose a world with relatively sufficient magical energy and a safe place to stay for a period of time. Upon hearing this sentence, Rosen subconsciously turned around and glanced at the two doors in front of the tower. He quickly replied, I think there's a portal that has just been opened 4 days ago that should meet your requirements. Oh, can you elaborate? Following the gaze of the golem, Zhang Cheng quickly found the huge portal and the busy street on the other side of the portal. Judging from the architecture and the clothes of the people, it was obviously an ancient city in Europe in the 90s of the 20th century on Earth. While retaining a large number of historical monuments, there were also many tall buildings. However, as the image remained in front of a dilapidated bar, the full view of the city could not be seen. As for the bar itself, it was blessed with some kind of mysterious magic that made it impossible for people to see the name of the bar from afar. Most passers-by did not seem to notice the bar, and no one tried to enter for a drink. Master, this is a place that is 70 to 80% similar to Earth. The city we are looking at now is London. However, in this world, apart from ordinary people, there's a group of people who call themselves mages. They can release all kinds of interesting magic through incantations and magic wands. Although there are fights and vendettas between them, they're not considered a threat to you at all. Most importantly, the density of magical energy here can completely meet your requirements. Rosen explained straightforwardly. Another magical Earth? The mages are waving their magic wands? I think I know where this is. Zhang Cheng raised the corner of his mouth and revealed a playful smile. He walked straight in the direction of the teleportation portal. A young dragon seemed to have noticed something and suddenly swooped down from the sky. It let out a loud howl, as if it wanted to attract his attention. Unfortunately, Zhang Cheng did not care about the young dragon at all. He stepped straight into the teleportation portal and disappeared without a trace. Just as the young dragon was about to rush into the teleportation portal, Rosen rushed over and grabbed the thick tail of the young dragon. He complained, "Stop, naughty little thing. Without Master's permission, you can't leave my side, let alone try to escape. Damn it, let go of me. You annoying lump of metal. I want to go on adventure. I want to conquer a world. I want to make those lowly mortals kneel at the feet of the great queen and obediently offer up their treasures." The young dragon cursed loudly with a tender voice. It was obvious that this was a young female dragon, so it had a very bad temper. From time to time, it would spit out fatal breath from its mouth. Behave yourself. Otherwise, I guarantee that Master will twist your head off. Rosen did not care about the flames that contained magical energy at all. He directly used his weight advantage to press the young dragon down. With his metal body that weighed several tons, he pressed the young dragon down and made it unable to move. They did not know that while they were fooling around, Zhang Cheng, who had entered a new world, was already surrounded by more than 10 unknown people holding small wooden sticks. Come, Wonderful Book House. Chapter 727. Sir, you are under arrest for violating and abusing teleportation magic, as well as exposing magic in public. Please cooperate with us and do not resist. A Caucasian man who looked to be in his 30s warned loudly. In his hand was a small wooden stick that was about a foot long. The tip of the stick was constantly glowing with a silvery white light. Even without sensing it, one could tell that a considerable amount of magical energy had been gathered. Not only this person, but the other men and women around him also did the same. The expressions on their faces were so serious and nervous that it was as if they were not facing a young man, but a terrifying beast from ancient times. Zhang Cheng smiled faintly as he sized up the other party's strange way of casting spells. After a while, he asked, "What if I say no? Do you think that trash like you can hurt me?" Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that the moment he passed through the teleportation gate, before he could do anything, he would be blocked by the natives. "Sir, I have to remind you, we are the law enforcers of the British Ministry of Magic, Luo AO. If you attack us, it is equivalent to attacking the Ministry of Magic. At that time, you will face extremely serious charges and be wanted." The man in the lead continued to speak in a bureaucratic tone, not realizing that he was dealing with such a dangerous person. "Wanted? That sounds interesting. I really want to know, if I kill everyone in the Ministry of Magic, will you still be able to issue a wanted order?" Saying this, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. One must know that he did not like to hand over the initiative to others to be taken advantage of. Even more so, he would not allow the laughable bureaucracy to ride on his head and abuse him. Damn it, he's a dark magus. Do it. Faint and fall to the ground. Petrify all of them. Thunderbolt, explosion. Shatter into pieces. Hearing the words kill everyone in the Ministry of Magic, the man in the lead did not hesitate to give the order to attack. In an instant, all sorts of strange spells shot out from the tip of the wooden stick, enveloping the target from all directions. But what was unbelievable was that even though all the spells accurately hit their target, none of them had any effect. It was as if they were all swallowed by an unknown force. "This is your magic? You are not even fit to tickle me. Perhaps I should let you see what real magic is." As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng slowly raised the paramount divine tool in his hand before abruptly releasing a lethal ball of grayish-white gaseous energy. This energy was so violent that in just 1 second, it vaporized all the water in the surrounding several meters, turning them into dry and stiff corpses. Even the rats crawling through the sewers could not escape this calamity. Arbiter's Withering. It was one of the most powerful necromancy spells in the Faran continent. Those pitiful, unlucky bastards didn't even have time to scream before they breathed their last. Even their souls were imprisoned in a beautiful gem that emitted an extremely evil dark red light. "You overconfident idiot. Should I go to the British Ministry of Magic and start a massacre? Or should I find a place to stay first?" "Forget it. Let's find a place to stay first. After all, I'm here to study how to use the power of creation, not to start a war." After saying this, Zhang Cheng turned around and disappeared at the end of a narrow and dark alley in London. Less than a minute after he left, a large group of people dressed almost the same as him instantly appeared in the same place. The old man in the lead first checked the corpses on the ground, and his expression immediately became serious. He muttered to himself with a slightly trembling voice, "They're all dead." He had been killed by a terrifying spell, and their souls were also taken away. I really can't think of any dark sorcerer in the world who can do this in such a short time. Could it be that the mysterious man is back? Another slightly younger woman next to him began to tremble uncontrollably. "No, it doesn't look like it. If it was the mysterious man, he would definitely be more than happy to leave his mark and gather those terrifying Death Eaters." The old man shook his head without hesitation. "You mean the Dark Lord? Oh my God, this is the worst news in recent years. We should inform Dumbledore immediately and let him make the necessary preparations." That's right. To be able to kill 16 Luo AO in just a few minutes is definitely not something an ordinary dark sorcerer can do. The scariest thing is that we still don't know what he looks like. The two younger men hurriedly agreed, their eyes full of reverence and fear. No one knew that the culprit was currently sitting in the Malfoy Manor in Wiltshire, England. He was sipping hot black tea while having a friendly conversation with the owner of the manor, Lucius Malfoy. "Mr. Zhang, if I may ask, what is the purpose of your sudden visit? Or rather, what do you want from the Malfoy family, and what are you willing to pay? After a dozen minutes of probing each other, Lucius finally lost his cool and took the initiative to ask about the other party's intentions. Through the brief conflict with the guards and house elves at the manor's entrance, he had fully realized that this seemingly young Easter man in front of him possessed terrifying magical powers. It was not something he could contend against. Zhang Cheng put down his teacup and replied with a smile. "If you don't mind, I would like to be your son's tutor. The current English magic world is too depraved, and the Hogwarts are unwilling to teach any offensive magic. I believe you wouldn't want to see your beloved heir turn into a complete good-for-nothing, right? You intend to teach him black witchcraft." Lucius's eyes widened in surprise. "Why not? Don't forget, there's never been any true peace in the magic world. The best way to protect yourself and your family is to obtain enough power," Zhang Cheng hinted meaningfully. There was no doubt that the place he was currently in was the world depicted in the Harry Potter series. It was a world with abundant magical energy, but not dangerous. It was very suitable for some secret research. As for the unbreakable and messy relationship and struggle between the Dark Lord and Dumbledore, as long as one did not actively participate, it was no different from normal Earth. Lucius hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. "All right, I agree to hire you as Draco's private tutor, and I'm willing to pay you a handsome reward. But before that, we have to sign a magic contract to ensure my son's safety." "Of course, I'll do as you say. I came with good intentions." "Oh, yes, if you see the report of Luo Ao's death in the Prophet's Daily newspaper tomorrow, please don't panic. I swear, they attacked me first before I defended myself." Chapter 728. There was no doubt that being a tutor had never been a tiring job, especially when the employer found out that the guy they hired could easily kill more than a dozen law enforcers without even blinking his eyes. Not only did the employer's treatment improve by leaps and bounds, even a naughty child who had never been obedient became a lot more well-behaved. Looking at the trembling boy in front of him, Zhang Chen closed the book of spells that he had borrowed from the Malfoy family library and asked bluntly, "Tell me, Draco, what do you want to learn from me? Complicated and changeable magic? Alchemy that can win wealth and respect? Or the essence of great power?" "I don't understand what you mean, sir," young Malfoy replied with some uncertainty. Although Lucius had not yet told his son that the new tutor was wanted by the British Ministry of Magic, he could still feel the dangerous aura emanating from him. It was even more frightening than his gloomy godfather, Severus Snape. After all, children are far more sensitive and alert than adults in this regard. "No, you don't need to understand. You just need to make a choice. In fact, I won't waste too much time on you because you don't have any amazing talent or perseverance. What I want to do is to impart some knowledge to you so that you can stand out among your peers and become a genius in the eyes of fools. That's all," Zhang Cheng casually explained. After a few days of observation and learning, he had more or less figured out the overall level of magic in this world and even learned most of the spells and spells. Although on the surface, most of the magic in the Harry Potter world was very low-level and childish, and the wand-waving action was also quite worthy of ridicule. In terms of practical application, it was better than any other magic world. Simply put, it was more inclined to use magic to make daily life simpler and more convenient, rather than being obsessed with fighting and killing. From the perspective of civilization, it cannot be said that this evolution was wrong and regressive, but it was true that most wizards were not good at fighting. Otherwise, so many law enforcers of the British Ministry of Magic would not have been collectively killed by an arbiter's withering spell. In addition, the seemingly ridiculous waving of the wand actually replaced the complicated spell-casting action to a certain extent and effectively reduced the length of the spell, making spell-casting easier and easier. If not for the fact that he already had a magic soul, Zhang Cheng would have definitely learned how to make a wand and then transformed the supreme god into a wand. But now, he no longer relied on incantations and spell-casting actions to strengthen the resonance between himself and magic energy. With just a thought, he could release legendary spells that many mages needed a long time to prepare. The huge difference between quantitative change and qualitative change was not something that quantity could compare to. Draco obviously did not like being looked down upon. He furrowed his brows and said in an unhappy tone, "I choose to learn magic." "Very well. Then let's start the first lesson, elemental magic. As far as we know, the four elements of the world's elemental magic. Earth, the four elements, the four elemental magic." Later on, as the research deepened, some new content was gradually extended, such as lightning. As Zhang Cheng spoke, he stood up and snapped his fingers in front of the boy. In an instant, a dazzling arc of electricity appeared out of thin air and drilled into Draco's body, causing him to twitch uncontrollably. Fortunately, the power of the arc of electricity was not particularly strong, and after a short period of paralysis, he quickly regained consciousness. "Damn it, what are you doing?" he shouted in shock and anger. "Relax, I'm just letting you experience the effects of electric shock on the human body." Many wizards in the magic world mistakenly believe that the greatest use of lightning spells is to directly burn the enemy with the greatest power, but in fact, it has many uses. The simplest and most effective one is to use a weak electric current to disrupt the nerve conduction system used by the brain to control various parts of the body. This does not waste much magic power, but the result is that the target will lose the ability to resist. Zhang Cheng completely ignored the boy's reaction and went into teaching mode. However, he was a little irresponsible as a teacher and did not care how much his student understood. His mind was full of thoughts of completing the mission quickly so that he could carry out his own research. When Draco, who was only 12 years old and extremely thirsty for power, heard this explanation, his eyes instantly showed an expression of excitement and expectation. This was because he dreamed of teaching his old enemy, Harry Potter, a lesson to prove that Harry Potter's original choice was wrong and that he was the best person. It had to be said that children who were angry with each other were somewhat childish and ridiculous. However, considering that everyone had more or less experienced similar situations, and sometimes even couldn't help but feel embarrassed when they recalled the stupid things they did when they were children, Zhang Cheng didn't appear too harsh. While he was busy teaching Draco a few magic spells that he had recently invented in a master bedroom on the second floor of the manor, Narcissa Black was holding a prophet's daily newspaper and whispering to her husband, "Dear, are you out of your mind? You actually let such a dangerous person be our son's tutor." "Relax, he's not as dangerous as you think. In fact, compared to the Dark Lord, his personality is quite gentle, and as long as we don't provoke him, he won't be a threat to us at all. On the contrary, he may become the family's protector in the future," Lucius calmly explained. "Protector?" Narcissa's eyes showed a trace of doubt. "Yes, think about it. If such a powerful adept were to stay in our home and teach Draco, what would the hostile fellows outside think?" Lucius pursed his lips meaningfully. "They would feel fear, and even fear. As long as we make good use of this, the Malfoy family will be able to obtain more benefits. Understand, you want to use him to deter some officials of the Ministry of Magic." Narcissa Black's face showed an expression of sudden realization. Lucius nodded lightly. "That's right. Those officials of the Ministry of Magic have always bullied the weak and feared the strong. Especially after the massacre a few days ago, many people believe that the new generation of the Dark Lord is about to rise. I believe that as long as he is willing to stand up and shout, many families will be willing to follow him and overthrow the Ministry of Magic." "Then what does he mean?" Narcissa Black impatiently asked. After all, in the magic world, no one could refuse to invest in a powerful magus who had the potential to become the Dark Lord. "I don't know. I'm not sure what he's thinking. Perhaps it's better to wait a while before probing. Anyway, Dumbledore is gradually getting old, and time is on our side now." With that, Lucius opened a bottle of red wine, poured 2 glasses, and handed one of them to his wife. "To the future of the Malfoy family. To our son Draco. Cheers. Cheers." Chapter 729. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Poor Malfoy, under Zhang Cheng's tutelage, quickly mastered no less than 10 low-level elemental spells of different attributes, including Ice Arrow, Fireball, Deflective Air Wall, Tremor Shock, Falling Stone, and so on. Although its lethality was not enough to be fatal, it was definitely a dangerous element among its peers. Of course, the price was that there were countless scars all over his body. Not only were there scalds, burns, frostbites, but there were also cuts and bruises. Fortunately, the magic treatment in this world was very advanced, and after treatment, there were no obvious scars left. Otherwise, Lucius and his wife would have been heartbroken. Zhang Cheng was not the kind of teacher who advocated gradual guidance and slowly guided his apprentices to learn in an orderly manner while avoiding risks. Instead, he was a cruel Darwinist who advocated the survival of the fittest. He always had only one attitude toward his apprentices, and that was to survive and gain his recognition through hard work. As for what the process was and how many hardships and dangers they had to go through, he did not care at all, and he did not care if his apprentices tried dangerous things in private. But Draco's situation was a little special, and he could not really watch him die. So Zhang Qing chose to ensure his safety while doubling the intensity of his training. In the beginning, the boy, who had been spoiled since childhood, could not bear the devilish training. He cried and shouted, wanting to ask his parents for help. But he soon found that his cry for help not only could not reach his parents' ears, but even the ubiquitous house elves could not hear him. Therefore, he had to stimulate his subconscious survival instinct and continue to practice until his magic power was exhausted and he fainted on the ground. With the cruel training day after day, Malfoy soon found that he was more and more proficient in magic, and his control and power had increased. He even used a few new spells well. There were a few times when he even defeated powerful illusions created by magic. This was something that he would never have dared to imagine in the past. As the saying went, some people were addicted to online games not because of how good the game itself was, but because they could get a sense of satisfaction from the game that they could never get in the real world. After all, in the game, every time a player killed a monster or completed a mission, they would receive real EXP, money, and equipment rewards. Moreover, as their level increased, the game character would also gain more power. But in real life, whether it was in school, work, or love life, hard work might not always be rewarded. Or rather, the reward was not obvious and was not proportional to the hard work and sweat. Sometimes one would have to wait for years, decades, or even decades before one could see the returns. But now, in just 2 weeks, Draco could clearly feel the rewards of his hard work. Naturally, he would not reject training. Instead, he was like a naughty child who was addicted to games, completing all the training programs on time every day until he fell into a coma. This sudden change in personality not only surprised Lucius and his wife, but also Zhang Cheng. However, with the last few days of the summer vacation approaching, Zhang Cheng finally ordered the suspension of all training programs. He looked at the boy who was standing not far away, his eyes bursting with fanaticism. After a full minute, he said, "Draco, I have to admit that your recent performance has been a little unexpected, so much so that I have begun to have some expectations for your future. But you have to remember that this expectation is not necessarily a good thing for you, because if one day you disappoint me, I will not hesitate to destroy you. I will never allow my apprentice to become a good-for-nothing, and I will not allow him to be mediocre. Please rest assured, teacher, I will not let you down." Young Malfoy placed one hand on his chest and gave a standard aristocratic salute. "Very good. Now go buy the supplies you need for school. I need to talk to your father." After that, Zhang Cheng gently waved his hand, indicating that the boy could leave. Draco bowed again and turned to exchange glances with his father, who was waiting outside the door, before quickly disappearing at the end of the corridor. Seeing his son's firm and straight back, Lucius's face showed a gratified expression. He followed into the room and closed the door behind him. He smiled and said, "Inviting you to teach Draco is probably the best decision I've made in my life. Looking at him now, I can conclude that the Malfoy family will definitely flourish in his hands." "It's nothing. This is my job, isn't it?" Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. Ha ha ha, that's true, but I still want to express my gratitude. This is the key to Gringotts' vault. I've already stored a large sum of gold coins inside. You can use it at any time. Lucius said as he took out the key from his pocket and placed it on the desk. As an ancient aristocrat with a long history, Malfoy had an enormous amount of wealth in his hands that ordinary magi could not imagine. Therefore, he did not take out a large sum of money to curry favor with this mysterious young man. Gold coins? Do you think I would care about these boring, precious metal coins? No, my dear Lucius, as long as I am willing, I can create gold that can cause the entire world's financial system to collapse, just like this. As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Cheng lightly tapped on the desk. Asterisk 1. Asterisk after a strange tremor. The desk, which was originally made of high-quality hardwood, directly turned into a dazzling gold that reflected the sunlight. Because the entire process happened too quickly and too suddenly, Lucius did not even notice the resonance caused by the alchemy stone's transformation. He only used his trembling hand to touch the cold surface of the desk and could not help but exclaim, "Merlin above! It's actually pure gold. How did you do it?" From what I know, even the most famous master alchemist, Nico Lemay, could not do this. At most, he could use a magic stone to transform a portion of mercury into gold. Just because he couldn't do it doesn't mean that I can't do it. Don't forget, alchemy is a mysterious power, and my understanding of alchemy is far greater than Nico Lemay's. Therefore, don't try to bribe me with money. I'm not someone who could be bribed with money. Also, here is a list of materials. I'll have to trouble you to purchase them, and I'll pay you enough gold. After saying that, Zhang Cheng turned the 2 bookshelves beside him into sparkling pure gold. When he brushed past Lucius, he lightly patted his shoulder. Chapter 730. Diagon Alley was the most bustling commercial street in the entire British magic world. It was also the place where many wizards bought all kinds of books, materials, and daily necessities. As school was about to start in Hogwarts, countless parents could be seen walking through the streets with their children. From time to time, there would be bursts of exclamations and laughter, making the already noisy environment even noisier. No one noticed that 2 uninvited guests had just left Overturn Alley and passed through a small path to appear in front of a shop. This is Diagon Alley? Zhang Cheng glanced at the chaotic scene around him. That's right. Generally speaking, if you want to buy something, you can find it here. But if it involves something illegal, you need to go to Overturn Alley next door to try your luck. As a rule, Boggen Bork never disappoints, provided that his insatiable greed is satisfied, replied Lucius in a low voice. Greed is not a bad thing. At least it can arouse a person's ambition and make them unwilling to live a dull life. Do you know? There is nothing sadder and more regrettable than living a life of mediocrity. Zhang Cheng turned around and gave Lucius a meaningful look. Lucius seemed to feel something and hurriedly avoided it. He lowered his head and echoed, "I completely agree with your point of view. Well, you don't have to keep following me. Go find your son. I want to wander around by myself for the rest of the time." Zhang Cheng waved his hand, indicating that Lucius could leave. Needless to say, he did not want anyone to find out what he was about to do. "Are you sure? There are many people from the Ministry of Magic here. I can help you settle them," Lucius asked carefully. "Don't worry. Let's not talk about whether they can find out what I look like. With the pitiful manpower of the Ministry of Magic, even if they come together, they are no match for me." While saying this, Zhang Cheng did not hide his contemptuous attitude. Then he walked directly through the crowd and walked into a pet shop. When a shop assistant saw a customer enter, he immediately greeted him enthusiastically. "Hello, sir. What would you like to buy? We have all kinds of magical animals here. Not only are they worthy new companions for wizards, but they are also good helpers. I guarantee you will be satisfied. I plan to take a look before making a decision." Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and pretended to be hesitant. Obviously, the seemingly ordinary animals in this shop were all special mutants under the influence of magic power. Not only did they have high intelligence, but they also had some spell-like abilities. It was important to note that the adepts were a very picky group. They would never raise ordinary creatures that were so clumsy that they couldn't even understand orders. What puzzled him, however, was what method did these adepts use to cultivate magical pets, and how did they ensure that they did not fall into the hands of ordinary people? Of course, please take your time and let me know if you need anything. The shop assistant seemed to have seen many similar situations. He nodded with a smile and went to greet the other customers. After watching the other party leave, Zhang Cheng raised his left hand and released a faint arcane energy that enveloped the entire pet shop, testing each animal's reaction to his magic. Unfortunately, these little fellows were too weak and could not detect the energy that was close at hand. Just as he was starting to feel a little disappointed, a mink that was dozing off in the corner suddenly opened its eyes and sniffed the air around it, making a series of cooing sounds. Seeing this, Zhang Cheng immediately shouted to the shop assistant not far away, "I want that mink, the white one in the corner." "You've chosen so quickly?" The shop assistant was surprised. At the same time, he gestured to his colleague to bring a small cage and wrap the white mink. Just as Zhang Cheng was about to say something, he suddenly heard a cry of surprise from outside, followed by ear-piercing screams and shouts that echoed throughout the entire street. "Beat him up, Dad. Don't do this, Arthur. Don't do this. Gentlemen, please stop beating him up." Following the direction of the sound, he soon saw a shop with the sign of Liza Bookstore not far away. It was surrounded by a large group of people. Two adult men were waving their fists and fighting each other in the most primitive and exciting way, as if they had completely forgotten their identity as wizards. One of them was none other than Lucius Malfoy, who he had just parted with not long ago. The other guy, who was slightly plump, was without a doubt Arthur Weasley. Coupled with the location of the fight and Gidro Lockhart's book signing, it was not difficult to guess the current time. It was the opening of the second semester's secret room. Looking at the slightly skinny boy with glasses behind the crowd, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed. He muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Aha! I finally get to meet you, the famous Harry Potter. Sir, your pet. Thank you." Throwing 2 gold coins to the other party, he quickly left the pet shop. While everyone's attention was attracted by the fight, he quietly came to the boy's side and reached out his hand to touch the soul fragment hidden inside the lightning scar on his forehead. In a short moment, he understood the power and horror of this kind of necromancy magic. By tearing one's soul, memory, and personality, creating or cloning another person was simply a genius idea. However, the corresponding price was also very obvious, especially the instability caused by the splitting of the soul. It would have a series of unpredictable effects on one's personality, behavior, and habits. Before Zhang Cheng could figure out whether this method of pursuing immortality was similar to Faust's, the half-giant Hagrid finally arrived. With brute force, he rushed into the crowd and forcibly separated the 2 people fighting. "Damn it, looks like I have to leave first." Zhang Cheng sighed helplessly and hid in the crowd, watching the Weasley family leave with Harry Potter. When the crowd gradually dispersed, he came to Lucius's side and asked with a faint smile, "Why did you do this?" "What?" Lucius tried to play dumb. "That diary. The diary that belongs to the Dark Lord. Don't think I didn't see you stuffing it into the hands of the Weasley family's youngest daughter." Zhang Cheng bluntly exposed the little secret in the other party's heart. When Lucius heard this plan, his expression changed several times in an instant. Finally, he smiled bitterly. "It seems that nothing can be hidden from your eyes, is it? I'm waiting for your explanation. It's very simple. I want to oust Dumbledore from his position as the headmaster of Hogwarts. He has been in power for too long and has been trying to suppress us pureblood nobles. Now, many families have expressed their dissatisfaction. I'm just giving them a push in passing." Chapter 731. Power, wealth, fame, power. These were all things that humans subconsciously desired the most. It could even be said that they were the lifelong goals of most people. As the most influential wizard in the British magic world, Albus Dumbledore was undoubtedly an influential figure of his time. He even had more power and prestige than the Minister of Magic. But as the saying went, power was like a piece of cake. If some people ate more, the rest would naturally eat less. This was why, throughout the story, Albus Dumbledore had been constantly plotted against by various conspiracies, whether it was from the pure-blooded Malfoys or the bureaucrats from the British Ministry of Magic. The reason was very simple. He could almost be said to be blocking everyone's path to success and had become an existence similar to a target of public criticism. If it weren't for his strength, he would have died many times over. Therefore, Zhang Cheng wasn't surprised that Lucius wanted to remove this old guy from the position of principal of Hogwarts. However, he didn't think that this kind of underhanded action could really shake Dumbledore's position. He just returned to Malfoy Manor with the attitude of watching a good show and continued to do his own research. It wasn't until the last day of school that he called the boy in front of him and pretended to be serious as he asked, "Draco, I heard that you had a conflict with a boy called Harry Potter at school and that you had disgraced the Malfoys many times. Is that true?" "Yes, sir. Potter and his friends have always opposed me time and time again. They even looked down on the pure-blooded nobles. I swore that one day I would make him regret his choice." The boy gritted his teeth and replied. After more than half a month of getting along, he was already full of respect and admiration for this mysterious tutor because in a very short period of time, his spell-casting skills had improved by leaps and bounds. In particular, a few simple incantations and elemental spells that didn't waste much magic power. As long as he used them well, even a 6th or 7th grade class leader might not be able to bear the consequences. More importantly, in the process of fighting with the illusions, he had accumulated a wealth of combat experience. He knew when to dodge and when to use defensive magic, far surpassing his peers who had never experienced actual combat. "So, after returning to school, you intend to teach Mr. Potter a lesson?" Zhang Cheng lightly tapped on the table, his eyes revealing an unfathomable light. "That's right. Why, you won't allow it?" Draco's pale face revealed a nervous expression. After all, half of the reason why he worked so hard to practice was because of his hatred for a certain boy who had survived a disaster or another form of love. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. "No, of course I won't interfere." Intense emotions were a powerful force, and it was also the source and motivation for one to become stronger. "But I do have one request, and that is to win fair and square, win beautifully, and leave the other side speechless. Tell me, can you do that?" Of course I can do it." Draco gave a resolute and decisive guarantee. He firmly believed that with his current mastery of incantations and spell casting, even if Harry Potter and his friends came at him together, they would only taste the taste of defeat in the end. "Very good. In order to ensure that you can fulfill your promise, I will leave a small monitoring spell on your body. Remember, if you fail, you will be severely punished." As he spoke, Zhang Cheng raised the supreme heavenly god and shot a ray of silver light into the boy's body. "I won't fail. I will return with honor and victory." Young Malfoy didn't know the true use of this spell at all. He bowed confidently and turned around to take his luggage to 9 3/4 station, preparing to take the Hogwarts Express train back to school and start the new semester of boarding life. Less than a minute after he left, the supreme heavenly god immediately let out a burst of ear-piercing laughter. "Ha ha ha, what a naive little thing. He actually believed that you had good intentions? Unbelievable. Are the people in this world really so naive?" "Shut up. Could it be that you have forgotten that you are not allowed to speak before obtaining my permission?" Zhang Cheng reprimanded expressionlessly. "My apologies, honorable evil master. I just couldn't help myself a little. If I'm not wrong, your plan should be to seize control of the child's body at a certain time and then conduct some secret research and experiments, right?" The supreme heavenly god's tone was full of undisguised malice. "You guessed right. I am very interested in the soul fragment that was left in Harry Potter's scar. However, this matter is not urgent. We still have plenty of time. Before that, we will try to create an intelligent life form with independent consciousness according to the plan." As he spoke, Zhang Cheng's gaze turned to the small white mink in the cage in the corner of the room. The latter was undoubtedly very intelligent and sensitive, instantly sensing the cold light in its master's eyes. It immediately began to jump up and down, frantically biting the cage in an attempt to escape. However, before it could escape from the cage, Zhang Cheng walked over and opened the cage. He placed the mink on the dissection table that he had prepared in advance and picked up a glowing scalpel. The small mink was terrified, and it began to whimper incessantly. There was a pleading look in its black eyes. "Relax. Pain and death are only temporary. I will bestow upon you new life and great power." As Zhang Cheng spoke, he mercilessly sliced open the mink's soft abdomen, revealing the internal organs and flesh within. "Give me the tree root grass." He ignored the mink's agonized reaction and directly issued an order to the supreme heavenly god. This divine tool, which was disguised as an ordinary wand, quickly found the appropriate materials and passed them to its master with a hand formed from magic energy. After a short while, Zhang Cheng had emptied almost all of the mink's internal organs, and even its brain. Then, he replaced the mink's muscles, blood vessels, nerves, lymph, and other systems with a network of strange plants. What was even more frightening was that the mink's body did not die from beginning to end. Instead, it maintained a clear consciousness. After everything was done, it could no longer be called a simple animal. Instead, it was a half-plant, half-animal life form. Its insides were completely composed of plants, so not only did it not need to eat, but it could also accumulate life energy through photosynthesis and unleash some interesting nature magic. However, Zhang Cheng was not satisfied with his creation. After inspecting it several times, he began to inject a large amount of creation power into it to see if it could induce any interesting changes. In less than 5 minutes, the network of plants within the mink's body began to contract rapidly, releasing a green light unique to nature energy, as if it was nurturing something. Chapter 732. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. As time passed, Zhang Cheng's patience was wearing thin. However, the plant that was emitting a green glow did not change at all. Half an hour later, he finally couldn't help but furrow his brows as he muttered to himself, "Damn it! Could it be that this experiment has failed?" "No, it hasn't failed yet, my esteemed master. The life form you created is still alive, but it needs some time to incubate." The paramount heavenly god hurriedly expressed his opinion. "Just because it's alive doesn't mean that it hasn't failed. You should know that my experiment this time was to create a complex plant neural network that could replace the nervous system of mammals. But look at it now. It doesn't seem to be reacting to external stimuli at all," Zhang Cheng explained in an annoyed voice. One had to realize that it wasn't easy to find a test subject that could withstand pure arcane power and the power of creation. He had only managed to find this white mink after strolling around the pet shop in Diagon Alley. Unfortunately, the white ferret did not complete the task it was supposed to complete. Just as Zhang Cheng was about to use a powerful spell technique to eradicate this ball of plant or animal, the plant that had curled up into a ball suddenly opened up. A vine extended from the center with a violet flower bud at the end. Before he had a chance to react, the flower bud abruptly blossomed, revealing the seed of life hidden within. This seed was about the size of a walnut, and it exuded a dazzling green light. In the instant that it landed on the table, it shattered with a loud crack, immediately following which a small mink that was completely constructed from energy jumped out. Its eyes were filled with awe and horror. The paramount heavenly god immediately chortled with praise upon seeing this. "Incredible! My esteemed master, you've actually allowed an animal to evolve into a spirit of nature. This is something that many gods are unable to do." "Shut up! Don't disturb my train of thought." Zhang Cheng scolded loudly and quickly reached out to grab the little guy who was trembling all over. Spirits of nature, as the name suggested, were special life forms that were eventually born through a series of coincidences in nature. They could be animals that had broken through their own limits, ancient plants that had been affected by energy, or even spirits and elements. In short, the spirit of nature was the result of a specific environment and countless coincidences. Theoretically, it could not be induced through human intervention. As for the strength of nature spirits, the strongest ones were almost comparable to deities, while the weakest ones were like little Martin in front of him. They could be squashed to death with just a flick of their fingers. In fact, the demigods living in the wilderness of Azeroth could all be classified as spirits of nature. Tell me, little thing, what exactly have you experienced? Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and revealed a chilling smile. At the same time, on the Hogwarts Express train, Draco was walking around alone, trying to find his old enemy, Harry Potter, and teach him a lesson. Unfortunately, he couldn't find Potter's figure even after searching through all the carriages. Even his detestable follower, Ben Lone, was nowhere to be seen. Obviously, for a 12-year-old boy who couldn't stay for the night because of a grudge, this was the cruelest torture in the world. Left with no choice, young Malfoy directly went to the carriage where Hermione was and questioned coldly, "Granger, where did Potter go? Could it be that he's so afraid of me that he's hiding?" "Afraid of you? Is this a joke? Why do I remember that when you guys fought last semester, you were the one who lost every time?" The girl was obviously not someone to be trifled with. She immediately sneered mercilessly. Not only her, but the other Gryffindor students sitting in the carriage also joined in on the commotion. After all, the conflict between them and the Slytherin students wasn't just a matter of a day or two. It could almost be considered a feud, so once there was an opportunity to mock each other, they would definitely not let it go easily. But these students didn't know that the current Draco was no longer a child who only knew how to play tricks, but a magus who had learned a lot of elemental magic and battle experience. Although he was still very young, he already had his own fangs. Without any hesitation, he directly pulled out his magic wand and pointed it at the girl who laughed the most fiercely. He roared, "Tremor shock! Asterisk pack!" Asterisk, a glaring electric spark spurted out from the tip of the magic wand and directly focused on the target. The pitiful girl couldn't help but twitch a few times, then fell to the ground with a thud and fainted. Frost, wind impact, deflecting air wall. In just a few seconds, young Malfoy had knocked down all the students who were laughing at him. He stepped on their bodies and came in front of Hermione. Staring at her with his hazy eyes, he pinched the girl's chin and said, "Lowly mud spawn, help me tell Potter that from today onwards, he'd better never appear in front of me. Otherwise, I'll let him have a good taste of failure, pain, and despair." After saying this, Draco decisively turned around and returned to the corridor. Taking advantage of the fact that the prefectural leaders hadn't noticed what had happened, he quickly disappeared without a trace. Just as he left, Hermione, who was frightened, couldn't help but cry. Weak, pitiful, and helpless. As a girl of ordinary birth, she had never experienced such a situation in her life. Her whole body trembled uncontrollably. At the same time, she realized that Malfoy, who used to be like a clown, had now become an extremely terrifying fellow. Not to mention other things, just beating up a room full of senior Gryffindor students was not something an ordinary magus could do. For a moment, she didn't even know what to do next. Should she report to the professor and the prefectural leaders, or should she hide it and look for her other two good friends first? She didn't even realize that there was a silver, glowing line following her chin and quietly entering between her eyebrows. These things, which are created by psionic powers, could act like antennas and receive signals transmitted from far away. As long as the spellcaster activated them, even an adult magus would find it difficult to resist, not to mention a group of children who didn't know anything. It was obvious that Zhang Cheng wanted to use this method to study the soul fragments in Harry Potter's lightning-shaped scar without alarming Albus Dumbledore. After all, this insidious old fox had been watching the boy who had just escaped death. If it were an adult who approached him rashly, it would definitely arouse his vigilance. But if it were a student or a friend in school, it would be difficult to detect anything. Unless these little things hidden in the human body were discovered, Dumbledore would not rashly interfere with the growth of the Savior. Chapter 733. Psychologists once said that there would always be some things in childhood that would have an indelible impact on a person's future. Asterisk dream whisper star. Obviously, Hermione Granger was in such a state. Even when she learned that her two friends drove a flying car to school, she did not show the slightest bit of surprise. Because compared to Draco's pair of hazy eyes, this kind of boring story was as childish and laughable as children playing house. To be exact, she did not sleep well at all last night. She had nightmares the whole night, and now her face looked pale and tired. Even a howling letter that Ron's mother sent a few minutes ago did not make her feel funny. "Hey, what's wrong with you?" Harry Potter was the first to notice that something was wrong and asked with concern. Hermione hesitated for a moment, and just as she was about to say something, she found that Draco had just walked through the corridor towards her. She could not help but shiver when she thought of the conflict that broke out in the carriage. She hurriedly pulled her friend and ran in the other direction, shouting as she ran, "Don't talk nonsense. If you don't want to be late for class on the first day." "But there's still at least 15 minutes before class starts. We have enough time," Ron weakly protested. "It's better to be early than late. Don't forget." "Hey, Potter, where are you going?" Before Hermione could finish her words, Draco suddenly jumped out from the corner of the wall and stared at his archenemy with his cold, snake-like eyes. Although he did not pull out his magic wand due to the school rules, a cold, murderous aura had begun to spread in the air. A few junior students who happened to pass by were so scared that they stood still and did not dare to move. "Malfoy, what do you want?" Ron, who had a stomach full of anger early in the morning, immediately pulled out his magic wand. Although this magic wand was broken into 2 sections, it was barely held together with tape. "Oof, I'm not talking to you, idiot. As a servant, you should learn to ask for your master's permission before speaking." Draco glanced at him contemptuously and then turned his attention back to the savior. "Dear Potter, I think Granger should have conveyed my words to you, right?" "Conveyed? Pass on what?" Harry Potter subconsciously frowned and turned his head to glance at his friend. Seeing his reaction, Draco immediately understood something. He sneered and mocked. "I see. She still hasn't told you what happened on the train, right? Don't worry, I'm a very generous person. I'm willing to give you some time to discuss it. Remember, you only have 3 days. After 3 days, I will start fulfilling my promise." Watching the guy he hated the most in school turn around and leave, Ron couldn't help but ask, "Hermione, what's going on? Could it be that you were hiding from the annoying Malfoy just now?" "What happened on the train?" Harry asked, not giving up. "Damn it, don't force me." The immense pressure caused the girl's sensitive nerves to snap, and her tears flowed out uncontrollably. She pushed Ron away, who was in front of her, and turned around to run towards the female toilet. Since everything had happened too suddenly, he did not even notice that a silver thread had entered his body through his neck. He leaned against the wall and asked in a silly manner, did I say something wrong just now? Why is she crying?" "Don't ask me. I'm not too sure either, but it definitely has something to do with Malfoy. We'd better ask around and see who Hermione was sitting with on the train." Harry shook his head in annoyance. "All right, but before that, we'd better go to class." When he said this, Ron's pupils flashed with an undetectable silver light, followed by a feeling that was completely different from before. But this feeling came and went quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it returned to its usual state. The poor savior did not even realize that his friend had been replaced. To be precise, he had been invaded and controlled by another person's consciousness. For the entire day, whether it was class or recess, Zhang Chung kept Ron's body, constantly probing the soul fragments in his lightning-shaped scar. Although Tom Riddle had split his soul into several pieces, most of them were attached to inanimate objects. Only this piece was attached to a living soul. In terms of research value, it was on a completely different level. Unfortunately, Ron's body and magic power level were too weak. Even after being optimized by him as a teacher, he was still far from being able to support research for too long. When night fell, he finally let go of control of the body and let the fragile boy have a good night's rest. He did not want to overwork himself and die of exhaustion. "Master, how is it? Did you get the information you wanted?" A supreme god asked curiously. "No, I didn't. Although the structure of this spell is not complicated, the core part involves the law of death. It's not something that can be figured out in a day or two. Fortunately, we still have at least 5 or 6 years, so there's no need to rush. All right, where's my cute little pet?" After saying this, Zhangcheng looked up and scanned the surroundings, looking for little Martin, who had already evolved into a spirit of nature. Cuckoo, cuckoo. Accompanied by a series of low cries, the little fellow quickly crawled out from the corner and stared at its master with a terrified expression. With its current level of intelligence, it could clearly see how powerful and terrifying the young man who had bought it was. Thus, it did not dare to go against his will. Its form seems to be very stable. There are no signs of collapse or degradation. Perhaps we can proceed to the next stage of the experiment. What do you think? Zhangcheng asked the supreme god as he played with little Martin, who had already grown close to 20 centimeters. The supreme god replied without hesitation, I think so, too. Through analysis, I discovered that the power of creation is not so much a creation as it is a force that induces and transforms. It does not possess the foundation to create matter out of thin air. Instead, it can cause matter and life forms to rapidly evolve in unpredictable directions through the injection of transformative factors. So, don't tell me that the woman who calls herself the creator created countless powerful primordial gods and life forms through a series of uncontrollable factors. Zhangcheng's voice was filled with strong dissatisfaction. He hated this feeling of not being within his control. Even more so, he hated the fact that he still had not figured out the source of the power of creation. My apologies, esteemed master. That's all we can confirm at the moment. The rest will require a large number of experiments to verify. Also, I suggest that you complete Project X as soon as possible and let that damned artificial intelligence process these complex data and information. It's much more efficient in this regard than I am. Chapter 734. Without a doubt, the power of creation was the most complicated thing Zhangcheng had encountered in his life, and, at the same time, the most difficult thing to understand. It was completely different from arcane, evil, shadow, and other magical energies. It did not have a corresponding physical body, and could not be observed through any spells or tools. Even divinity and divine power, which were said to be incomprehensible to mortals, were much simpler. In order to understand the essence of the power of creation, the only thing Zhangcheng could do was experiment, and experiment. Through observing the changes and reactions of different experimental subjects, he concluded and established a corresponding system. Of course, this was not easy. Until now, he had not found a trace of a pattern. It was as if every experimental subject would eventually evolve in a different direction. Just as he was at his wit's end, the secret room of the Hogwarts finally opened once again. Gidro Lockhart, who liked to be in the limelight, could not wait to jump out and announce the establishment of a duel club to train young magi on how to protect themselves. Of course, from a certain perspective, this idea was good. At least it was easier to gain the approval of young people with lively personalities than to study boring theories from books all day long. Unfortunately, he had apparently forgotten that he was only a scammer with a glamorous appearance, and did not have the ability to defeat a strong opponent. In the end, during the demonstration, he was directly thrown to the ground by Severus Snape, making an embarrassing scene. Strictly speaking, this had nothing to do with Zhangcheng, but when Draco Malfoy and Harry Potter stepped onto the dueling platform, he suddenly realized that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to probe the reaction of the Soul Shard. Without any hesitation, he directly projected his consciousness into Draco's body and slightly optimized the chaotic magical energy in the boy's body. After doing all this, he imitated the pride of the Malfoy family and bowed slightly. This action undoubtedly surprised Harry, who understood Draco very well, and he politely nodded his head. Although he did not understand why his nemesis was acting so strangely, he did not want to lose to him in terms of elegance. Prepare your wands. When I count to 3, you can start practicing your spells to disarm each other. Remember, just disarm your weapons. Do not do anything unnecessary. I don't want any accidents to happen. The ignorant Gidro Lockhart shouted. 1, 2, 3. Begin. Following the command, Harry raised his wand and chanted the spell that he was best at without hesitation. Not long ago, he had asked some senior girls about how Draco used a series of powerful magic to defeat several senior girls on the Hogwarts Express train. He was very clear about how powerful his opponent was. Once Malfoy got the chance to attack, he would be the one to lose. This is your strength? A boy who survived a disaster? The savior of British magic? The famous Harry Potter? Zhang Cheng skillfully dodged the spell shot by the magic wand and deliberately put on a contemptuous look as he mocked. Obviously, this kind of low-level spell duel was no different from a child's play in his eyes. It was not a threat at all. To be precise, the magic system of this world itself had a very serious flaw. There was almost no directional magic in the true sense. As the name implied, directional magic directly locked onto the target. No matter how the opponent dodged or escaped, the magic cast would pursue relentlessly until the energy was depleted or the target was hit. It could be said that in a battle between spellcasters, directional magic was the most common, and also the most effective means of attack. Otherwise, a flash or a short-distance teleportation will be able to avoid most threats. What are you trying to say? Harry furrowed his brows. No, nothing. What I want to say is that fame does not equate to strength. You are too weak, so weak that as long as I wave my wand, you will fall to the ground and cry just like this. Just as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng imitated an ordinary magus, raised his wand, and shouted, "Greasy!" In an instant, a large black, greasy stain suddenly appeared at Harry Potter's feet. In a moment of carelessness, he directly lost his balance and fell heavily to the ground with his face facing the sky, making a dull thud. Immediately after, electric sparks spurted out from the end of the wand, causing the boy to tremble uncontrollably. It took him a few seconds to recover. When he clenched his teeth and struggled to get up from the ground, he found that the wand in his hand was gone, and his opponent's wand was pressed against the lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. How is it? How does it feel to lose? You are too arrogant. You always think that you are special and have extraordinary talent, but in reality, you are just a pitiful worm who knows nothing. Think about it. If I were to give you a death curse now, would you still be able to survive? While speaking, Zhang Cheng quickly mobilized all the magic in Draco's body. He cut off a small soul fragment from the scar and silently stored it in his wand. Just as he completed the last step, Severus Snape finally realized that something was wrong. He rushed forward and shouted, "Malfoy, stop! Let go of Potter. He has already lost enough face today." "As you wish, Professor." Zhang Cheng bowed gracefully and turned to jump off the dueling platform, receiving the huge cheers from the Slytherin Academy. The little snakes who had always been keen on pursuing power and authority worshipped those who could crush their opponents. Moreover, the one who was defeated this time was the famous Harry Potter. He was the one who overthrew the Slytherin Academy's championship last year. After a simple celebration, Severus Snape quickly came to find him. He stared at him with two uncomfortable eyes and asked, "Malfoy, tell me, what is wrong with you today? Also, where did you get those strange incantations from?" "Nothing, Professor. I just suddenly understood the meaning and value of my existence. Potter and his friends are just a bunch of idiots who are not worthy of being my opponents. As for spells, have you forgotten that Father hired an outstanding tutor for me during the summer holidays?" Zhang Cheng smiled and spread his hands. He was very clear that this double agent, who was full of contradictions, was suspicious of him. After all, even though Snape hated Harry Potter, he was not willing to see him come to any harm. He would even step forward to protect him at crucial moments. "Tutor? Can you tell me what kind of person he is?" Severus Snape narrowed his eyes and probed. "Hee, you're a good friend of my father. If you want to meet my tutor, you can come directly to Malfoy Manor." After saying this sentence full of hints, Zhang Cheng immediately turned and returned to Draco's dormitory. He started to weave the boy's memories and left silently. He was very clear that after this incident, Dumbledore would most likely become vigilant. He would not be able to use such tricks for a long time. Chapter 735. Draco Malfoy's outstanding performance in the Duel Club had undoubtedly triggered a series of extremely serious chain reactions. The most obvious one was that Harry Potter had sunk into a state of intense self-doubt and denial. He had been listless for a long period of time. Even his favorite Quidditch competition couldn't be aroused. He was muddle-headed like a walking corpse. As the principal of Hogwarts and one of the masterminds behind the scenes in the British magic world, Albus Dumbledore naturally could not watch the chess piece he had nurtured degenerate. He hurriedly carried out a round of heart-to-heart talk. Finally, on the day of Christmas, Harry Potter returned to normal. Of course, this was not because of any miraculous effect from talking to a 100-year-old man. It was because Hermione's compound soup was finally ready. He intended to take this opportunity to expose the evil true face of his nemesis, Draco, and find out who had opened the secret room to attack everywhere. Then, he would stand in front of everyone as a school hero and prove that he was a brave person worthy of Gryffindor. It had to be said that this kind of thinking was full of childishness. But considering that he was only a 12-year-old boy in the embryonic stage of rebellion, no matter what he did, it was not worth making a fuss over. After all, when humans were in the adolescent stage, their minds are always filled with all kinds of unrealistic fantasies. So before a perfect worldview and values were established, no matter what they did, it was more or less a little silly and laughable. At night, under the cover of the festive party, Harry and Ron used drugs to drug Draco and Gore, Malfoy's two followers, and changed into their clothes before following a girl to sneak into Slytherin's common room. Draco was currently sitting in front of the fireplace, staring blankly at the blazing flames. No one knew what he was thinking, but due to the powerful strength he had displayed this semester, no one dared to go near him or ask for a rebuff. Even though the fiasco not long ago had been gnawing at Harry's self-esteem like a hungry mouse, he still mustered up the courage to walk up to them and greet them as if nothing had happened. "Hey, Harry, Malfoy, how was your Christmas?" Boring holiday. I won't waste my time on this." "All right, where did you two idiots go? Did you forget that I warned you not to run around for a while?" Draco turned around and glared at the two of them. As his strength increased, his personality also changed drastically. He looked cold and serious, completely unlike a 12-year-old boy. I'm sorry. We forgot." Harry shuddered uncontrollably. He would never forget the words his opponent had said while pointing his wand at his forehead on the dueling platform. He would never forget the oppressive feeling he had felt. "You forgot. Other than eating, what else do you two remember?" Draco reprimanded mercilessly. "Oh, right. Secret room. Do you know who opened the secret room?" Ron pretended to be stupid and took the initiative to ask. "I don't know. I wish it were me. Do you know? I really want to meet the person who opened the secret room and see if we can do something great together. Unfortunately, my tutor forbade me from having any form of contact with her, or else." At this point, Draco paused for a moment, and an excited expression appeared on his face. "Tutor?" Harry keenly grasped the main point. Malfoy nodded proudly. "That's right. Do you think that my strength this semester just fell from the sky? No. Father hired a powerful magus to teach and train me how to cast spells. You can't imagine how powerful he is. Just an illusion created by him can defeat most adult magi. I've only received half a month of training, and I've become like this. Once this semester ends, I'll become even more powerful and firmly trample Harry Potter under my feet." "Merlin above, you have a tutor? That's not fair." Ron couldn't help but exclaim. "Fair? Don't be silly. How can there be fairness in this world? My tutor taught me that the so-called fairness is nothing more than a facade used to deceive those living at the bottom of society. It has never truly existed. If you want to become stronger, then come to my family's manor during the holidays and receive training together. I guarantee that under his training, even someone as stupid as you will be reborn." Having said that, Draco left the two of them and disappeared at the end of the corridor in Slytherin common room. After watching him leave, Ron immediately lowered his voice and said, "Damn it. Looks like our operation has failed. That guy doesn't know anything at all." "No, at least we know why he's suddenly like a different person. A famous and powerful magus is teaching him." Harry's eyes seemed to light up with a ball of fire, emitting a bright light. "But what does that have to do with us? Ron scratched his head, not understanding the situation. Of course it does. Since he can hire a tutor, why can't we? My heavens! Are you crazy? Let's not talk about how much money it costs to hire an adult magus. Just finding a powerful magus willing to be a tutor is very difficult. How do we know if we don't try? I'm not willing to be trampled on by Malfoy forever. All right, I'm not willing either. Let's hurry back and discuss this with Hermione. Maybe she can come up with some good ideas. Just as the two boys were fervently discussing how to make themselves stronger, Zhang Cheng, who was far away in Malfoy's manor, finally received the Christmas present of his dreams. It was the wand that originally belonged to Draco. Through hypnosis and suggestion, he effortlessly obtained a small fragment of the Dark Lord's soul. He carefully took out this piece of soul that was emitting a faint gray light and placed it in a container. He could not wait to do some complicated tests and experiments. After about 10 hours, a secret regarding the law of death was finally revealed. Unbelievable. This is simply unbelievable. Is this the true face of death? The essence of creating soul tools is actually stealing. Zhang Cheng muttered to himself, his eyes glowing as he stared at the surging energy within the soul tool. This was completely different from what he had expected. He had originally thought that Voldemort's creation of soul tools would be very similar to the cloning spells of the high-grade magi of Faron Continent. But in reality, it had nothing to do with cloning. Instead, he tore out all kinds of strong emotions in his subjective consciousness along with a part of his soul and integrated them into the law of death that enveloped the entire world, forming an independent entity that was very similar to himself, but completely different. Simply put, it was cheating the law of death, stealing life from the world of the living to maintain oneself. Only a true madman would choose to obtain eternal life in this way. Chapter 736. Paramount Heavenly God, tell me, what do you think death is? Zhang Cheng asked as he stared at the soul fragments in the container that had already been disintegrated into countless tiny particles. According to the definition of human medicine, when the electrical signals in the brain disappear, it means death. However, from the perspective of magic, as long as a living being's soul still exists, they're still alive. My esteemed master, death has never been an absolute definition. Instead, it is a relative definition. What determines death is not the objective reality. Instead, it is the perception and understanding of death in the general environment. The divine artifact expressed its opinion in an unhurried manner. It had to be said that as a weapon with the ability to think independently, its intelligence level was not inferior to the smartest human to some extent. On the contrary, due to its lack of prejudice, its perspective was often more impartial, and it could provide some very good suggestions. Zhang Cheng was clearly well aware of this, which was why he frequently raised some questions. On one hand, it was to serve as a reference. On the other hand, it was also to nurture the complexity of the paramount heavenly God's thought process so that it could evolve toward a higher level of logical thinking. He casually released a large amount of arcane energy and reassembled the scattered particles into smaller pieces. He then said non-committally, "Perhaps you're right. Death is not an absolute concept. It's just a relative definition in terms of understanding and cognition. However, you've overlooked one point, and that is that all worlds, including the entire universe, have an absolute system. This absolute system determines whether a living being is considered alive or dead." "Oh, you're referring to the rule of death?" A strong sense of curiosity appeared in the paramount heavenly God's eyes. "That's right, the rule of death. It's a powerful force that no mortal or God can ever control. It's a force that surpasses everything and stands above everything. Even the death gods of the mythological era had only absorbed a small portion of the rule of death's power. Think about it. Which death god could cause the death of a planet or a rampage? No, they couldn't do that. The only thing they could do was establish a kingdom of death to contain the souls of mortals." As he spoke, a bone-chilling madness flashed in Zhang Cheng's eyes. That's right. Through the fragments of Voldemort's soul tool, he had already glimpsed a hint of the truth behind the secret of death. Compared to the omnipresent rule of death, the death gods, lich kings, hell, and heaven were all insignificant specks of dust in the massive rule of death. From the moment the universe was born, death was like an invisible specter that followed closely behind. Even the universe itself couldn't escape the fate of ultimate destruction, let alone the lives that existed in the universe. However, there were always some people who could sense the existence of the law of death and twist it under certain circumstances, turning it into a power that they could control. They were either the gods of death in myths and legends, or some extremely powerful individuals. You also want to obtain the rule of death? Thus, the paramount heavenly god was a divine artifact, God's God, and God's is God. Such a powerful rule. Who wouldn't want to pry into it? God's, heavenly God's a God? God, paramount God, heavenly God's God, to God. What about the power of creation? Are you planning to give up? The paramount heavenly God continued to ask in an uncertain voice. Zhang Chung hesitated for a moment, then smiled and shook his head. No, why should I give it up? Have you forgotten that I'm an extremely greedy person? I won't let go of anything of value. Moreover, understanding the enemy's power and depth is also a wise choice. Most importantly, the increase in the rule of death can conceal my true trump card. Understood? Then, when you plan to talk to this wizard who calls himself Voldemort, I believe that some of the knowledge in his mind will definitely be very useful to you. What's the hurry? Our dear the Dark Lord doesn't even have a fixed body now. He's busy avoiding the enemy's pursuit. Let's wait for another 2 years. After 2 years, he'll naturally appear in front of us. As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Chung waved his hand and extinguished the lights in the basement of Malfoy's manor. He disappeared without a trace through teleportation magic. At the same time, after Christmas, Lucius was brandishing the large amount of gold he had just obtained and purchasing all kinds of businesses without restraint. Regardless of whether it was Diagon Alley or Tumble Alley, a large number of shops were under his name. The name of the Malfoy family was like the sun at high noon. Even the bureaucrats of the Ministry of Magic had to maintain a certain degree of respect when carrying out their tasks. Otherwise, a tsunami of public opinion could immediately crush a person. As the saying went, most of the pain and difficulties in making choices in this world were caused by poverty. Once there was an endless amount of money to spend, all of this would no longer be a problem. Of course, not everyone could be bribed by money. For example, Arthur Weasley did not fall for this trick. Not long ago, he even personally led a team to search the Malfoy family's manor in order to find evidence of them secretly possessing black magic items. Lucius felt deeply humiliated and disgusted by this. Now, he was sitting alone in the living room, gripping his cane tightly, thinking about how to teach the other party a lesson that would leave a deep impression. But before he could think of any good ideas, he suddenly saw Zhang Chung appear out of thin air. He hurriedly stood up and greeted, "Good afternoon, sir. Is there anything I can do for you?" Good afternoon, my friend. Thank you for your kindness, but I don't need any help for the time being. By the way, how's the implementation of your plan going?" Zhang Chung sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. He picked it up and took a small sip as he stared at the other party with great interest. "It's going well. In a few days, I'll be able to send Dumbledore's half-giant servant into Azkaban. Then, when the situation deteriorates further, I'll mobilize the board of directors to get rid of that damned old fellow. At that time, anyone who was once loyal to him will be dealt with without exception, especially the Weasley family," Lucius explained with a cold expression. "By spreading the relics of the Dark Lord's school days, opening the secret room, creating panic and chaos, and then letting the current headmaster bear the responsibility, I have to say that your idea is good, but it can only be used against ordinary people. Someone as powerful as Albus Dumbledore will not be defeated so easily. Don't forget that the magical world has always been a place where strength speaks. Unless someone can stand up and defeat him, he is the uncrowned king. Even the bureaucrats of the Ministry of Magic will not easily offend the most powerful magus in existence." "You mean, what I mean is that as long as Dumbledore is willing to compromise to a certain extent, no one will take the huge risk of angering him. After all, the only difference between a light magus and a dark magus is a loss of control of his emotions. Can you imagine the scene of Dumbledore abandoning his bottom line and going on a killing spree? Chapter 737. The British intellectual historian John Emmerich Edward Dalberg Acton, Lord John Emmerich Edward Dalberg Acton, once stated in his book, Freedom and Power, power leads to corruption, and absolute power leads to absolute corruption. Thus, with the acceleration of human civilization's progress and development, when building a new social system, countless countries' politicians referred to this point of view and strictly restricted the rights of various government departments to prevent some people in important positions from having too much power, leading to serious corruption and abuse of power. This was the case for power, and so was strength. Especially the powerful magi. What did they rely on to restrain them? The answer was simple. It was the moral bottom line they had set for themselves. Take Albus Dumbledore, for example. If he had not forced himself to abide by the law, was there a second person in the entire British magic world who could restrain him? Obviously, no one. For the same reason, Voldemort did not set a bottom line for himself. Thus, he effortlessly destroyed the rule of the British Ministry of Magic and almost established a new order. Lucius, who was good at currying favor for personal gain, had not realized this point before, but with Zhang Qing's reminder, he immediately discovered that the whole plan was full of loopholes. He frowned and probed. Then what do you think can really drive Dumbledore away? He has been the headmaster of Hogwarts for too long and has become a huge threat to us school board members. Many people believe that Hogwarts belongs to Dumbledore. Isn't that simple? What is Dumbledore's weakness? Or rather, what is the moral bottom line he has set for himself? Zhang Qing laughed and asked, "Weakness?" Lucius could not help but frown and fall into deep thought. Seeing this, Zhang Qing immediately put down his teacup and explained softly, "That's right. Weakness. Haven't you realized what allows Dumbledore to maintain his respected position? Excluding his strength, there are only 2 points. One of them is that he is the headmaster of Hogwarts. All parents yearn for the most powerful light magi to protect their children's safety. The other point is that he is willing to abide by law and order like an ordinary person. Simply put, Dumbledore will never be able to compete with the current system. Otherwise, he will lose the support of the people and become a black wizard hated by everyone. That's how it works." Lucius looked enlightened. "In that case, I should give up on making a move in the school and shift my focus to the Ministry of Magic." Yes, as long as you controlled the Ministry of Magic, it was equivalent to controlling the system and the law. Coupled with the subtle influence of the newspapers and public opinion, even Dumbledore would be wary of you. At that time, you will naturally be qualified to negotiate with him face to face and take back the rights that should belong to the board of directors. Zhang Qing expressed his opinion meaningfully. As a veteran who had experienced countless schemes and battles, his political IQ had long been above most politicians. It was effortless for him to dig a few holes for an old fox like Albus Dumbledore. "I understand. Thank you for your guidance. I will now discuss with some friends and temporarily suspend my original plan." Saying this, Lucius stood up and planned to go on a long trip. Just as he raised his wand and was about to cast Phantom Transference, Zhang Qing suddenly reminded him, "Don't forget to take care of your house elf, Dobby. From what I know, he has been leaving the manor for no reason recently. I don't know what he is secretly doing." Dobby. Lucius was obviously stunned. After all, in the minds of Magi, a house elf was a symbol of loyalty and hard work. In order to win the favor of his master, he would do anything, even if it meant giving up his life. Hence, almost no magus would suspect that a house elf would betray him or his family. "Yes, Dobby." Zhang Qing nodded lightly. "From what I know, Harry Potter and his good friend Ron took the flying car to school because someone sealed the entrance to Platform 9 and March 4th. During this time, Dobby happened to leave the manor. I believe you understand what this means, right?" Damn it. Lucius's expression changed drastically, and he immediately shouted at the top of his lungs, "Dobby, you dirty little bastard. Hurry up and come out." Pa. Asterisk accompanied by a crisp sound. An ugly little thing about half the height of a person appeared in the living room. He looked very nervous and afraid, his whole body trembling as he carefully asked, "Moss, Master, please summon Dobie for you. What orders do you have?" Asterisk bang. Asterisk Lucius raised his leg and viciously kicked him away. He cursed loudly, "Bastard, you actually dare to betray me? Betray the Malfoy family?" "No, no. Dobie did not betray us. Dobie only wanted to protect Harry Potter." The house elf struggled to get up from the ground and defended himself. Unfortunately, Lucius did not think so. He picked up his staff and began to beat the elf. In the blink of an eye, the little thing was on the verge of death, spitting out large mouthfuls of blood. Lucius resisted the urge to stomp the elf to death and took a deep breath. He gritted his teeth and said, "Very good, very good. I never imagined that there would be a disgraceful traitor in my family. Don't worry, I will not execute you immediately. Instead, I will let you have a taste of something worse than death." Dobie the house elf was so frightened that he shuddered. He crouched on the ground and curled up into a ball, not daring to make any moves to defend or resist. Thousands of years of slavery had caused this race to completely lose their independence. They could only rely on the adepts to barely survive. "Sir, I heard that you are currently conducting a series of interesting experiments. Why don't you let Dobie become your experimental subject?" Lucius's eyes flashed with a vicious light. "Thank you for your generous gift. I am more than happy to accept it. You should know that house elves are very interesting magical creatures. Dissecting and modifying them will definitely be very challenging." Having said that, Zhang Chung pursed his lips and stared at Dobie with an extremely abnormal gaze. No one liked a traitor. No matter how good the reason given on the surface was or how noble the motive was, betrayal was still betrayal. In most cases, the fate of betrayers was usually very tragic. This time was no exception. After a short while, the pitiful house elf was dragged into the secret underground laboratory. About half an hour later, cries of extreme pain and despair began to echo in the manor. No one knew what happened inside. They only knew that 72 hours later, when Dobie once again appeared in front of everyone, half of her body had been replaced by various metals and plants. The clever look in her eyes had also disappeared, replaced by a terrifying coldness and brutality. "Come, wonderful book house. Come,